Council Budget Study Workshop. And let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councilman Pimentel, would you lead us, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Clerk's Office. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Nickel,
Here.
Councilmember Pimentel,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Krista,
Here.
Mayor Boyles.
Here. All right, now is the time and place for public communications. Seeing none, we'll go into special orders of business. And this is consideration and possible action regarding a budget study workshop resulting in City Council receiving and filing of staff's discussion, analysis, and recommendations in preparation for the fiscal year 2018-19 budget for the general fund, internal service funds, enterprise funds, special revenue funds, and debt service fund, which encompass the majority of the city's revenues and expenditures. Staff will present on the following matters. And City Manager, who's going to be presenting today?
Mayor, members of council, we'll have Joe Lilio begin this conversation. The department heads are here to answer any questions when we get to the department requests that council may have. And just as a way of lead-in, this is our, I guess, our third workshop on the budget. Our goal is to get ideally final direction from council today and put together the final budget for adoption.
Great.
At your next council meeting. We have spent most of the first two workshops looking at large-scale priorities, but also talking about the general fund, which is $72 million of our $126 million budget. So we're going to start today by talking about that other $54 million in the various enterprise and reserve funds of the city. We do put quite a bit of money away each year to deal with specific issues. We have the golf course, we have the sewer fund, we have the water fund. And Mr. Lilio will go into those in greater detail. We thought it would be good for the council and the public to get an update on where we stand with all of our reserves, not just the general fund reserve, but all of our reserve funds in the city. And then we would like some direction on the long list of department requests and the CIP program so that we can put the final budget together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lilio.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor Boyles, City Council members.
Good afternoon.
So we'll start off with the special revenue funds. Just kind of give you a background. Special revenue funds are primarily from federal, state, and county programs such as traffic safety, state gas tax, SB1, asset forfeiture, Measure R, Measure M, Prop A and C, CDBG COP funds. So these are primarily from federal and state sources. So I won't go over line by line here, but is there any specific questions you have on any of the funds that you see in front of you? You also received this in the budget packet last week. And these are primarily used for purposes of either capital expenditures such as Measure R and Prop A, Prop C, asset forfeiture, or operational budgets that are used to supplement general fund expenditures. Again, these are usually not ongoing sources of funds where we cannot rely on them to be long-term, so we don't have any staffing costs budgeted there. Many years ago, cities, I think including our city, used to include staffing on asset forfeiture, and many of those funds have dried up over the years, so it's not a reliable source of funds. So again, it's usually just either one-time capital equipment or programs, or items to help supplement what would be general fund expenditures. Any questions on any of the funds you see in front of you at all? So the total revenue for the special funds for next year is projected to be just slightly over $2.5 million. Total expenditures are projected to be at $3 million. And the reason for this, some of the funding, and I'll go back one slide, if we can go to, for instance, Prop A or Prop C, so we're allowed to accumulate up to 3 years of funding there, and it could be we're saving up for a particular project. So the reason why we have expenditures higher than revenues is because many of these funds have a healthy fund balance that, again, we've accumulated either 1 or 2 years worth of funding. Any questions at all from council?
Quick question, is there a reason why we think that Coupa is going to trend down?
I'm sorry?
Is there a reason why we think that our Coupa revenue will trend down? Looks like we're losing about $60,000 on our projected budget, proposed operating budget for
Chris,
it.
do you know why? Did we have anything large last year with the initiation of the refinery?
We had
Regulations.
part of the Coupa is the Program 4, and that's a new state mandated requirement for the Coupa. My apologies, I don't know exactly why we're showing the estimated revenue of 527, other than we did have the one-time or ongoing Coupa expense and a state pass-through.
So-
I can certainly.
I'm sorry, Chris. Last year, our budgeted revenue was $530,259. And maybe what I should have shown up here, and I apologize, is what the prior year's adopted budget was. So that is not reflected on here. The first column, the financial column, is just the estimated beginning fund balance for next year. The next column is estimated revenues for 18-19, followed by proposed operating budget, followed by the proposed capital budget, and then the total budget is the last column.
Okay, I'm reading that backwards, but my understanding was that we were looking at more Coupa activity going forward.
Correct.
So does it make sense for us to forecast that, or?
I'm sorry.
The 527 this year to the 464 the following year, is that what you're speaking about?
Well, if we are budgeting at 464, but we estimate 527,
No, one's
one's
revenue.
operating, one is revenue.
One's revenue and the other is expense.
One is revenue, the 527, and the 464 is operating expense.
Is operating expense? Got it. Understood. Yep, reading that
Yep.
backwards.
And the
Thank you.
prior year's revenue was 530,000,
Now,
so
now
it's
I'm with it.
basically
Yep,
flat.
yep, got it.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other questions on the special revenue? Okay, thank you.
Okay, debt service fund. So this is used, sorry, while I turn to my page. The debt service fund records the city's facility lease activity for the Douglas Street gap closure. The city entered into this lease agreement in February 1st, 2006. It's a 30-year lease with an annual fixed rate of 2.87%. So the bond will be paid off in 2036. And the revenue source from this comes from traffic mitigation fees. Again, we have a beginning fund balance of about 770,000, estimated revenues of 180, and the proposed bond payment of 545. So there's plenty of funds there to cover that. Enterprise funds, water, estimated revenue there's $30.7 million. Operating expenditures of 27.2, capital projects of 3.3 million. So total expenditures of 30.5 million, and we do have a fund balance of about 15 million. Wastewater, we're starting off with a fund balance of about 1.4 million. Revenues estimated at 3.8, operating budget of 3.8 plus capital of 1.3, so total expenditure budget of 5.1, so that is going to draw down almost completely on the reserves. The golf course, this does have a negative fund balance, and again, it's been shown for several years, and this is because of the loan that it has from the equipment replacement fund. Estimated revenues next year, we went very conservative, just about under 1.5 million, expenditures about 1.7. And we're not factoring any changes. This is basically taking the status quo. Senior Housing Fund, so we do have a fund balance there of $1,040,000, and this was set aside a few years ago for capital improvements that may need to be done at the senior housing facility. Revenues are estimated at $2,700, and that's just revenue interest income. And then proposed operating expenditures of $27,000. We haven't programmed any capital expenditures in there. That will be brought to council, if anything, during the fiscal years requested. Internal service funds, equipment replacement, estimated revenues, and these are charges to the individual departments, mainly to the general fund, but also to the water and sewer funds. So total revenue of just under 1.6 million, and total expenditures of 8.1. And what we've traditionally done is just budgeted all the funds available to spend. That way we don't have to go back to council for every item. But we're not anticipating to spend this. We typically spend about 1.5 million a year from equipment replacement.
So real quick, Joe, so just for clarification, so the senior housing fund, your estimated revenue is 2.7, but you're gonna spend $27,000, and similar to the golf course fund, the revenue is lower than the spending. Where's the money coming from?
Correct. So in the case of the senior housing fund, it will come from that 1,040,000 fund balance.
Yeah, but how does that, where does that 1 million, so you're drawing down on your reserve, what's the plan? We're just gonna draw down on a reserve, or is there, like, where does the reserve come from, and where do we?
Sure. Yeah, the reserve came from, it was just a little over 2 years ago. I think it was maybe 3 months into the job here at the city. There was this loan that the senior housing was paying to the city, and I worked with the city attorney to unwind that due to various legal reasons. And those funds were deposited back into the senior housing fund. So that's where that 1,040,000 came from. As far as revenue, there really is no revenue source at this current
So
time.
eventually that 1 million is just gonna get lower and lower and lower, then it's gonna go back to the,
I think we're mixing funds, so the rents at Park
Those
Vista
aren't the
generate revenues that pay for its operating expenses, right?
Correct. So, yeah, the property management firm collects the rents, and that pays for all the operating and potentially all the capital
so
as
what's
well.
the $27,000?
So this is attorney fees. It's mainly attorney fees, and I can get you the detail.
I was just
That's
curious.
the bulk of it.
I mean, because if over time, if if you're not replenishing that fund.
Well, I think the idea was I know there's a lot of plumbing needs, right? They're waiting on some assessments of facility infrastructure needs, similar to what we're doing at the city on a
Correct.
larger scale. But they don't have, remind us, they don't have a line item they don't put into an equipment replacement type fund or some kind of other.
So we did change that. City Council several months ago adopted a reserve policy for the senior
Oh,
housing.
yeah, that's right. Okay, so it's kicked in, but when does that start? Is it already started, or?
Their budget, I believe their budget's based on the calendar year.
Okay,
The property management firm bases it on the calendar year. So with the next cycle, they'll reflect that new reserve policy.
that's right. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You didn't cover the liability, did
No.
you? Okay.
CIP funds, so you did receive the last budget study session in August. So it's not the big sheet where you're saying yes or no, but there is a CIP sheet that you received the last council meeting. So this is the same exact information that was on that sheet. I believe it was Exhibit
This
C
one?
last time. Yes.
This
Correct.
one.
Yeah, this is the same data that was on that sheet. So these are the 17-18 projects that were approved by City Council that are rolling over to 18-19. So many times the CIP projects will be multi-year. They're not able to finish that in 1 year. So we have about just under 2.3 million in 17-18 projects that are rolling over to 18-19. And there's a description of them and where the funding source is coming from. Next slide is the 18-19 CIP funds that were approved by CPAC and that we're asking City Council to approve. These are primarily funded from water and wastewater, CDBG, and then special revenue grants. And that accumulates to just slightly over $5 million. So these would be new CIP projects that we're asking City Council to approve on top of the carryover of the 2.3. And then later on, towards the end of this presentation, on your voting sheet, there's also an additional 3.1 million in CIP projects that we're asking City Council to approve from general fund dollars. Reserves. Wanted to touch basis on all the city's reserves. So next year, City Council did approve a 19% reserve policy. That will bring the general fund reserves to just slightly over $13.7 million. Next line item down, economic uncertainty fund of $2 million. So that was fully funded with last year's budget. And we're maintaining that $2 million balance. Equipment replacement, we have about $9.8 million in there, and that represents about 49% of the total equipment that needs to be replaced. But we are 100% in line with where we should be today. Debt service fund, there's $770,000 in the reserve there.
Joe, can you clarify that? Does that mean based on the life depreciation?
Yes, based on the depreciation schedule.
Okay, thanks.
We're 100% funded. Debt service, $770,000 in the fund balance. The annual payment is $545,000, and it's good policy to have at least 1 year's worth of reserves, which we do have that, so we're good there. The OPEB trust, that's other post-employment benefits, basically the retiree health for retired city employees and existing city employees. We have a total of $23.1 million in there, and that's as of July 31st. The total liability is $64.3 million, so we're about 36% funded. And we do fund that at a rate of about $500,000 per year. Fluctuates, but it's about $500,000.
What's a good benchmark there in terms of percent funded?
So we do have an actuary report done by Bartel and Associates, and they actually work with. So we have this trust. It's through CalPERS, the CERT trust, and it's recommended that we get to 100% funding. That's the ultimate goal. We're far from it. Council can look at setting a goal of maybe somewhere between 85 and 100%.
Well, how do we compare to our peers? I mean, I know we're doing okay when it relates to PERS liability percent funded. How do we
Yes.
compare in this OPEB area?
So we're in the top third. So 2/3 of cities only have about 15% funding. The OPEB about 50% funded or less. 15% funded or less. So we're actually doing very good. State, I think, is like 10% funded. So we're on track to have this fully funded, I think, by early 2030s.
Scott might actually still be on council then.
Yeah. We did start early. We are getting a high return compared to our actuarial study. Last year was 10%.
Yeah, just slightly over 10% last year.
Okay, thank you.
Then we have the 115 pension trust with council funded that in end of April of 2018. So we funded that with initial $1 million. And through July 31st, that balance is $1,022,000. Then we have a 401A PARS retirement enhancement plan. This is a legacy plan that I believe ended, Greg, correct me if I'm incorrect, 2011, 2012.
Supervisors MOU, yeah, supervisors union MOU.
So we do have that funded at just under 1.1 million. The total liability there's 2.2, so we're almost 50% funded.
No, I think it ended in 14.
14.
Yeah.
And then we're on track to be 100% funded there by the year 2032. So I'm going to touch, I'm sorry, is there any questions on that slide?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. We're going to touch on developer fee accounts and other miscellaneous reserves. So fire developer fees has a balance of about $190,000. Library, they draw down all those funds for the current year's budget for some library projects. Parks developer fees has a balance of just under $21,000. Parking and lieu account, $36,000. PD developer fees, 84,000. General plan and reserve is 612,000, and the permit center surcharge reserve, just under 350,000, but 350,000 was transferred over for the project that they're currently working on between planning, building safety, and IS for the permit software.
So it would be like over 600,000, you're saying?
For the permit center surcharge?
Right.
Yeah, almost close to 700,000.
Okay. And then the parking in lieu, can you just give us a little bit of history there, Joe? I don't know that we've covered that extensively, but that balance of 36, what's it been? What's it been used for?
Yeah, that's the downtown parking in lieu program. We had built a balance up. We used, between $230,000 and $250,000 several years ago as part of the Richmond Street project, so we've drawn that down. So $36,000 is the current balance. We do have a couple of property owners who are on a 20-year payment plan, so we know that we'll be receiving payments from them for the next 20 years, and then any additional businesses or developers who sign up for the program will pay into that fund if they participate.
What are the current annual payments of those?
I don't know the exact amount, but it's a $17,500 per space payment over 20 years with I think about a 5% interest rate. 3 to 5% interest rate. I don't recall the exact number.
Like 20 grand a year, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Approximately.
20? No, 1,000.
Hmm?
About $1,000 a year.
No, for all of them. I thought you said, how many people are there?
Um,
How many spots?
I think it's Rock and Brew, and I think
Oh,
it's
it's like five,
Yeah,
okay, it's
Yeah.
like a few $1,000 a
Well,
year.
Yeah.
if we do approve the, in the new
Yeah,
plan
yeah.
for the Smoky Hollow, there's a component of loop. That's
I
what's
think
gonna
there's
happen.
about $10,000 to $15,000 a year coming in on the payment plan.
Okay, thank you.
And then if the Smoky Hollow, in the Smoky Hollow plan with the new in lieu of parking would be the same bucket or would be a separate bucket?
Be separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just want to touch on some updates to the general fund budget. So for 17-18, the proposed revenues are $74,465,000. This is a slight change from what I presented in August. I think it's a difference of just under $500,000. A bulk of that came from a reduction in developer fees that we're anticipating. We still are budgeting for the Raytheon payment of $750,000. Any questions on the revenue side at all?
No, so you said reduction in developer fees. Is that
Yes.
something you can talk about, or? what do you mean?
I think there were some numbers in there that they were just carried over from the prior year. So they needed to be cleaned up.
Just a miss or something. Okay, got it.
Right.
And then we approved some new developer fees. The fee structure was changed?
Yes, that's built into the
That's
budget.
built in, okay.
Correct. Yes. So that's charges for services.
And Joe, did you say it was about $700,000 less than expected?
No, about 500,000
500.
that from what I presented to you in August.
Got it.
Okay, revised expenditure budget, it's broken down by department. The total there is $72.3 million. And this does not include any of the items that are on this list. So if we're looking at, during our mid-year presentation, which I presented to council in late April, I presented the year-end revenues at about $72.1 million. And this is just a comparison where we're going to end this year compared to next year. So we're seeing an increase of almost $2.9 million in revenues. And bulk of that is going to be from the transit occupancy tax, $1 million, property tax, $800,000, franchise fees, franchise tax, about $700,000. So those are the major contributors to the increase. And then charges for services, around $600,000 increase.
What does TRA stand for?
Tax resolution agreement.
And so why is it less in the coming year than it was last year?
So the way the TRA works, there's a total amount that Chevron has to pay on an annual basis, and that's increased by an annual CPI factor. However, it's what they pay in sales tax, UUT tax, business license tax, all these taxes combined, and the difference is put into that bucket of the TRA. So for instance, if their total amount is 11.5 million, and all those various revenue sources, the sales tax, UUT, business license, didn't cover that 11.5, the difference they owe us is represented in the TRA. So their UUT tax is significantly increasing next year. So that's basically where it's shifting from the TRA to the UUT.
Thank you.
The CPI is on the overall amount?
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
correct.
Joe, if you look at this from a fixed versus variable, or maybe that's not even somewhat fixed, predictable, as opposed to more correlated to the economy. Business licenses, obviously, more variable in nature.
Sales tax.
Sales tax, UUT potentially,
Yes,
and TOT substantially, right?
correct.
Okay. So what percent of the overall budget is that roughly? I see 24 million, 25 million sales tax, TOT, UT, 31 million in total, business license 42. More than half, essentially.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
those are the largest revenue sources.
The property tax is really the only one that's semi-stable.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking of the TRA too. TRA is, I guess,
TRA is
negotiable
stable as well.
potentially, but stable as it can be, I would suppose. All right. Thank you.
So I already covered this, some of the variances. This is the expenditure budget, so taking the 17-18 year-end estimate of 68.5 million and comparing it to the proposed budget, adopted budget of 72.3 million. So really here, why we're seeing such a large variance is due to our vacancies. That's a majority of the difference. Any specific questions there? And we're currently at 39 vacancies, which represents just under $6 million.
So, just for clarification, so our budget was to spend the 72.
No.
No.
So this is taking fiscal year in, the current year, 17-18 on the left, and just reflecting where we're expecting to be in 18-19.
If all 39 are filled,
Right,
that's.
right. So
taking
we don't
us
have
up.
any vacancy rates.
And so that's a
built into the
delta
budget.
of,
Is it 65 to 72?
It's about
7 million. So.
yeah, a little, about 6.5 million.
We're coming in, we're gonna be over by, say, 3 million in our budget comparatively, right? So I'm just saying, like, we've spent some of them, if the delta is approximately $7 million of the vacancies, and we've had those vacancies now for quite a while, we've spent some of that money
Yes,
yet, so we've spent about half of it, correct?
a little bit less than half. But,
Okay. Of the savings.
yeah. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
This is general fund and economic uncertainty reserves, just a history of starting with 2015-16 and where we're going to be in 18-19. So 15-16, the reserve council did adopt a 19% reserve, and that went down to 18% in 16-17, stated 18% in 17-18, and then for 18-19, we're going to 19%. In economic uncertainty, if we go back to 15-16, it was funded at $1,250,000. And 18-19, we're fully funded now. So between the two sources of the general fund reserve and the economic uncertainty, for next year we'll be at about $15.7 million. Okay, this is snapshot of the big picture here. So we we started the current fiscal year, October 1st, 2017, with about 15.2 million in reserves. Estimated revenues for 17-18, which we touched on already, 72 million. Less the expenditures of 68.5 million. That leaves ending balance of 18.7 million, and then we have revenues for next year and expenditures for next year. This leaves a total fund balance for the general fund at 20.8 million, less than 19% reserve, so it leaves about 7.1 million that discretionary funds. So on this list is what we're going to be talking about, how to spend down that. So again, in August, I reflected about 6.8 million. So there's just a little under $300,000 in additional funds now that are available. And if council chooses to allocate that somewhere or leave it in reserves and address that mid-year or put it in a parking lot, that's up to council's discretion. I guess it's just a snapshot of next year. The revenues less the expenditures, showing a net operating reserve of $2.1 million. And again, the undesignated general fund reserve of 7.1 million, which we'll be talking about next. So I don't know if, Mayor, how you want to begin the discussion of this list. Did you want to talk about the operating CAP first?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that appears to me. Well, let's just knock out employee engagement. Is there any concern on the council with regards to employee engagement, which was related to? There was some description here: recognition, appreciation, management, supervisory, professional development, leadership programs, citywide wellness, and employee lunch and learn training series. About the intent or the number? Scott?
Questions?
Yes.
I mean, I would love to hear from Greg, I guess it would be, as to like how did we come up to $200,000?
You know, I think we looked at what the cost of a wellness program is, what the cost of various training programs are. It is a rough number. It's about, what did we figure per person? It's about $800, I think, or $750 per full-time position.
And this is something that across the board, every department is like, yes, we need something like this. Let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are additional dollars that we would use on a citywide decision-making basis. The departments have already started various engagement plans or already had been engaged with them and have monies in some of their budgets for those programs. There is an example when we get to the department requests of fire that is asking for an enhanced employee wellness program, which is, cardiographs and much more medical than what we would be doing for the entire workforce.
So just for clarification, that $200,000 is on top of anything that's listed in this list?
That's correct.
And this was really meant to be taking a holistic look at the city and looking at programs that can benefit, across departments.
Joe, could we, assuming we approve the amount, would we be able to get a look at what that money is going towards in advance of spending it?
Absolutely. And we were actually, Greg and I were talking about forming a committee of represented employees, and they can come up with some of the ideas and programs. But absolutely, yes.
And we did our first employee engagement survey, so we at least have an indication of what folks are looking for qualitatively, right?
Yes.
Okay. Carol, does that work?
Yeah, it works for me.
Chris?
I have no objection.
Okay. Scott? Okay. I think we're moving forward with that, the $200,000. It's just the direction would be to come back with some ideas. That'd be
Right.
great, please. All right, let's go on to the, let's see.
Payment to section 1.
Yeah, good call. The payment to the Section 115 Pension Trust Fund. You want to just give us a quick refresher on that? some of us aren't on that CalPERS committee, what that would be used for and the intent.
Absolutely. So council did approve setting up the Section 115 pension trust November of 2017. And we, council approved funding that, the initial funding in April of 2018 with $1 million. But what this is going to be used for is, as our pension costs are increasing, which we know that because CalPERS has lowered the discount rate, they've redone longevity tables. And give you some examples, males used to be at 67, I believe they're at 82.
Life expectancy.
Life expectancy, yes. Females at around 69 now, I believe they're at 83 or 84. So that coupled with the lowering of discount rate and some other actuarial assumptions, those costs, those pension costs are increasing the cities via CalPERS annual billing, and that has a huge factor on the increasing unfunded liability. So having this pension trust really in some ways is, we can use it as a budget mitigation reserve. So as we, and I don't have that graph that I usually show in my presentations, but going out to 2021 where we expect operating expenditures to exceed operating revenues, and particularly in the out years, the mid-20s, where that expenditures exceed revenues by several $1 million, we'll be able to tap into this pension trust and use it to pay the unfunded liability.
And there's a little bit of a points play too. There's a spread, right? Isn't there, like we're getting 3 points in this or something as opposed to 1?
So-
6 to 7, I think.
Yeah, our portfolio right now, I believe it's just under 2%. So our internal portfolio has increased dramatically over the year.
Yeah.
However, with the pension trust, it's just as the CalPERS pension portfolio, they invest in equities. So this also invests in equities, and it's a moderate investment portfolio where it's a mixture of bonds, fixed income, and in equities. And that annual return is anticipated to be about between 5 and 6%. Right now, it's trending about 8%. So much higher than our internal portfolio.
Okay, so we're picking up 40 grand a year in interest income for every $1 million, roughly. Plus, we got the certainty that those funds can only be used for that purpose in the future. Could never be drawn down for any other reason, right?
That is correct. And we're always, at least through the mid-2030s, we're always going to have a pension payment.
So is there any argument to allocate more in your mind to this right now?
We absolutely could. Or we could also allocate some towards the paying down the unfunded pension liabilities.
Yeah, that
has
would have
immediate
more
impact.
Right, that would have more benefit. That's right.
Right.
Okay. All right, so let's discuss that one. Let's jump ahead to that one. Let's discuss paying down the CalPERS unfunded pension liability. We'll come back to the 115. Y'all okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay. Joe, can you give us some context there, please?
Absolutely. So our unfunded pension liability totals approximately $130 million. $100 million of that is public safety, and about 30 is miscellaneous employees. That's non-sworn personnel. That has dramatically increased over the last several years, again, because of the previous assumptions I've told you about, that CalPERS has lowered their discount rate, increased their longevity tables. And that's anticipated without really making additional payments. So we get an annual bill from CalPERS, send you an annual bill, here's your payment, it's based on a 30-year amortization. However, the first 5 years, it's kind of equated to a reverse mortgage, if anybody's familiar with that, where you have negative amortization and you're not even covering the principal, let alone, you're not even covering the interest payment, let alone no reduction to the principal. So the way they have the amortization table set up, your annual payment that you're making, very little of it is actually paying down your pension liabilities. If we choose to pick off particular line items, so of that $130 million that I mentioned, CalPERS has numerous line items that make up that $130 million. So what we can do is allocate funds towards those particular line items, pay them down, eliminate the line items that have negative amortization, so the line items that have amortization of, I believe it's actually 23 years or longer, It's negative amortization. And we've done that in the current year's budget, 17-18. We've allocated almost 600,000 to the miscellaneous group, a little over 600,000 to fire, and about 650 to PD. And it's had tremendous savings to the city. And if we continue to do that each year, coupled with putting money away into the Section 115 trust, also coupled with prepaying our annual unfunded liability, which council approved that back in June, we can really tighten those budgets and save funds for the city in the long term when it comes to pension liabilities.
So saying $1 million, if we did that as opposed to the 115, what's the payback on that? I know it's going to vary
Yeah, it's
depending
going
on
to
the
vary,
line item.
but it'd be approximately, so you'd pay down the principal of $1 million and have about $700,000 in interest savings. So it's significant.
Okay. So it's not immediate, it's amortized over 23 years or whatever.
Or whatever the line item has, correct.
Yeah. That is significant for the city.
Yes.
Wow.
It's a much larger savings than it is what we're going to make on that percentage of the 115.
Correct. Correct.
It's just cash now. You know, you put that $1 million aside, you could theoretically have $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 more money in the bank account next year as opposed to spread over, I don't know, 15, 20 years cash flow.
Correct. And the council could choose the money in the 115 trust to withdraw those funds at any time and make additional payments towards the pension.
Joe, I know we've asked you this before. Anything new coming from, I know Governor Brown's on his way out, and there was some hope that he would do more to, I don't know, second version of Pepper or whatever, reform. Obviously, that's not happening. Is there anything on the horizon that you could see that would suggest that we wait as opposed to, barring a catastrophic recession, of course?
Well, so your pension payments are made up of two factors. You have the unfunded liability, which is our largest part of our payment. And that's for everybody that has retired or actives that have worked up until whenever that actual report was issued, and it's 2 years behind. So really, it's money that's already due. That's the $130 million I talked about. The ongoing costs, which is referred to as a normal cost, that's a much lower portion of our total annual CalPERS liability. For miscellaneous, it's about 8% of payroll. Public safety, it's just over 21% of payroll. So anything that legislation that I can see that would happen would probably tackle that normal cost, like PEPRA. Yeah. For public safety, the PEPRA payment, instead of being about 21%, it's approximately, I think, 16, 17%. I don't really see anything happening with the unfunded portion unless you retroactively went back and somehow there's a court case pending with the California Supreme Court that's supposed to be, I think, decided on in December.
And the pension trust fund, of course, could be used for your normal costs, not just the unfunded liability.
Correct. It could be used for.
So worst case scenario, if there was some bailout of sorts, I hate to use that term.
So there are several cities, not that we're in this position, nor do I foresee we ever would be, but there are several cities that have stopped making their unfunded pension liability payment. They continue to pay the normal payment. And what that has done, obviously, is drastically reduced costs for them, but it also has hit the individuals that have retired from those cities, has reduced their pension by anywhere from 40 to 60%, depending on the city.
Wow.
Joe, those unfunded numbers don't include unfunded employee retiree medical, correct? That's something to tune.
That's the OPED benefit.
That's the OPED.
I touched on earlier.
Yep.
That's 64
About
million.
65 million, yep.
About 23 million funded.
So the total unfunded liability, OPEB and pension, and any other deferred employee benefit is what, 170?
194.
194, thank you. Okay. So, thoughts from the council in terms of allocating what is suggested here? Well, it's a range, actually, so any thoughts on this fourth or fifth line item on the slide?
That 194 comes down to about $12,500, I think, for every man, woman, and child in the city. So I think that anything we do to tackle that item number 5 outweighs some of these items that don't have enduring benefits. So I think we may be even a little light on 700,000 to 1 million on that contribution. I think it may behoove us to go through this list and then
See
see
where we
what's
can-
left over under that 7.1, less the 200,000, less the capital improvements, and see if 1 million is, if we have even more that we could allocate. That would be my
I absolutely concur.
fearful druthers.
Carol?
Yeah, and what we did with last year's budget is we, council adopted a certain amount, I believe it was just under 600,000, and then mid-year with some savings, we allocated an additional about 1.3 million as well.
Right. Okay, so let's come back to these last two. So we've got one down, employee engagement, and let's go into department requests next. This is the long sheet that you handed out last time, right?
Correct.
I would like to, rather than go line by line, just ask the council if there are concerns on some of the requests. I have one. I'll just, this is more kind of a philosophical thing. I struggle with adding, by my math, $750,000 roughly in ongoing, call it headcount or professional services, regardless of how you look at it. Mostly it's headcount, given what we just talked about. But I also look at this and think, man, we definitely need a CSI property officer. We need HR help. We need, makes sense to have crime prevention plan consultant. We need a lot of these positions. I really do believe that. I think economic development, which is a big chunk of that overall 777, as I've said before, I think that's one of the few areas we get a return on our money. I struggle, though, with adding that much recurring headcount with all of the benefits that we offer our employees. I would prefer that we stay lean and offer more to our existing by way of employee engagement. We're going into union discussions with all our groups right now. Truly be an employer of choice. So just throwing it out there, I would prefer to see that amount offset elsewhere. In other words, finding that money, Joe, and I know it's not an easy task, but finding that money from other operating expenses. So if we want to add those headcounts because we can justify that we need them in these certain departments, my thought is that we find them from other areas. Probably not a popular sentiment, but that's how I'm feeling right now.
And then, Joe, so we have currently 39 open heads, FTEs. How many did we have at the end of last year and the previous years? It was what's the average that we're kind of trending?
I think last year we were in the late, high 20s, so around 28 is what's coming to mind.
Mm-hmm. In
The
previous
year
year?
prior to that, I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Okay. So, I mean, I concur with Drew that if we're operating with 39 head count open, and obviously some of them, a lot of them are in the police department, so take the police out of that picture because they're a little bit of a different animal. Maybe we don't need those head count. And maybe we just need different head count. And maybe it's eliminating those heads that have been open for over a year and repurposing them to the new head count, the new job descriptions that we need.
Well, I guess my reaction would be that we have.
Hey, Greg, wait one sec. Before you even counter that, let's just see if there's even consensus on this or not with the council, because it might not even be worth your time. All right, Rochambeau.
No, I think there are on the sort of first principle one, I think there are some line items in here that we probably do all have an opinion on and want to take a look at. But secondarily, I think that Yeah, the money spent on retaining and maximizing the employees who are working very hard right now in terms of employee engagement, even if there's a number that if we allocate 200,000 and they spend 90 and that 110 goes back in the pool, that's fine. But I think maximizing those, I think I wholeheartedly agree. I know that when we look at some of these roles, we are seeing some repurposing and reallocation of people, and I think headcount was kept intentionally open to do that, which is good and it is smart. So I think that the majority of the ones that I see on here are ones we've all kind of either agreed they've been repurposed or make sense, and ones that have some enduring return. I think there are a few, specifically some of the big ticket ones, that are worth just sort of revisiting. I think there were a few in the city manager office that we looked at and wanted to know if those could be combined or were sort of mutual roles, because they're both such long-term big ticket items, because with that high salary comes a large application for the pension piece. So I guess the very short version is I agree in principle with you, Mr. Mayor, on the approach, but I also think we want to go and look at these and maybe just address them in specific because they are broken out.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Scott?
I'm definitely in agreement with, I think we do have a consensus. I think to myself, well, gee, if we didn't say anything, if we did nothing with this at all and no heads were added, is sales tax going to drop next year? Is TOT going to drop next year? Is utility user tax going to drop next year? No, it's not, because none of those things really have to do with inside staff, and those are our revenue drivers. So then I think what I fear we don't want to do is say, yeah, okay, you have such a wonderful quality of work life, we're not going to give you any more employees to get the job done, and you're going to keep having to do more with less people. So I fear that we're on thin ice there, but I am in agreement. I would rather run lean and then add people as the need arises. Because if we're completing a year now, and it doesn't, people aren't running for the hills. They're not like, Joe, I can't do all this work. I'm out of here. Greg, I'm leaving. There's way too much work on my plate. And so I don't think we need to add a bunch of bodies, especially when we look at our long-term liability. And Joe, you're never going to live this one down, but that graph, where those two lines intersect, we're staring down the barrel of that gun. And so I feel like, who are we to say, yeah, here, we're going to give you a full-time job, and then, 2 years from now when we have that intersecting line, sorry, you got to go. And now we're making cuts. And so I'm with you guys. Run lean, but yes, with Chris, to your statement, I think there are some items I'd like to go through here line by line and say yay, nay. Let's do it.
Okay, Greg, back to you. Sorry about that.
My statement was going to be that we've leaned out our budget since 2010 and living through the Great Recession and gone from 320 heads to 275 authorized and 235 that are full. I guess it's a useful exercise. I do think it's going to be difficult. I do think that right now our salary and benefits budget's about 80% of our general fund. So there's 20% left over for capital projects, for utilities, for equipment, training, and contract services. And we have fine-tuned those categories over the years. I don't know that there's that much to be gained. Now, you could easily say, well, Greg, don't fill some of these other positions. Problem is, there's already people that are in those jobs in a lot of cases, right?
The contractors.
So I do think it may be a difficult exercise. I do want the department heads to get credit for running tight ships, because they have. They've been asked to do more with less.
Yeah, I think the direction is to find it.
And I certainly
Find
don't
the
want to
offsetting
impact
funds.
services. I assume what you're saying is find ongoing expenses to cut. A one-time solution isn't really solving.
Yeah, I
your
don't
issue.
even know, is 80% the right number? Do we know? I think that Joe as a finance professional can attest that organizations year after year are expected to get more and more efficient with less and less people. And so I don't think we know until we know. And there might be some departments that are cringed in the audience right now because they're really feeling the burden. Like, I feel like I'm feeling the heat right over there at Mona. But there might be other departments where there's some opportunity there. And we're really only talking about, if it's $775,000 and our average employee makes 120 loaded or something, we're talking about 4 or 5 people finding that. not hiring that, or, you know, not saying let anyone go, but that's it. I think that's is that the consensus, folks? I think we all agreed, right?
We'll give it a try and report back if that's the direction of the council.
Okay. So then do we want to go through some of these? Chris, I think you wanted to go through some of these line items, right?
Yeah, I think some of these in the name of, to me, there's sort of two buckets left. Is it whatever sits in the department requests does not sit in the CalPERS payments? So there's a bit of a, it's a balloon. We got to figure out which end to squish. And I think that some of these are worth looking at.
I think anything that says consultant to assist with laserfish imaging, I'm just striking all those. I would rather figure out a way to do that with internal staff or just wait. I mean, we got consultant fee. I mean, it adds up here. We got fire department 25,000 and city clerk's office 30,000. Right, so $55,000 to have paid people to come in and scan things and put them into laserfish. I don't know if we get another intern next summer and get that done, or we find staff time to do it. No, maybe. I don't know, Mona.
Well, I can't speak to the other departments. I can only speak to, we couldn't have an intern do this. This has to do with developing the workflows and meeting the legislative requirements. So we would need someone that specializes in it. And it's fine, I understand cutting it, but
And also, we have on the IT, initiative, the whole laserfish.
Yeah. This is in addition to what was on the IT list, right, Greg or Joe?
It's right here, laserfish, scan microfiche and plans to PDF and have it available. And that was, I don't have a dollar figure by it. Oh, I do, $350,000. So we already have identified $350,000 on the IT budget for laserfish. So this additive scanning of the laserfish at the department heads that are asking, is this added to this 350, or is this 350 just to get the software?
Good afternoon. I believe we talked about multiple components. Some of the portion that Mona's talking about is putting together workflows, if you will, and looking at the use of laserfish across the entire department. So we could potentially use some of that 350 for that. Other portions of that 350 is to basically scan backlog paperwork that we spend a ton of money either housing it, looking it up, so forth and so on. So I believe I'm not sure what that total is. I think it's about $30,000, but I think we can cover it within the 350.
And then you said 20,000 down here, so the additive 50. So I guess the question is, the 350 on the IT budget,
Mm-hmm.
if we're instituting new laserfish technology, wouldn't that be part of the whole workflow process? Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be encompassing of that?
It could be,
So
yes.
this could be redundant, is what I'm asking.
It could be. I don't believe that was the original intent, but it could be redundant at this point. We could look at scanning backflows, optimizing some of our existing workflows across departments.
So when is this laserfish supposed to kick off? Because
Well,
it was approved, right?
Yes, it was approved. Some portions of it have already kicked off. For example, in PD, as well as in, I believe, PBS. They've already started scanning their backlogs, and then they're also dealing with the existing incoming paper to reduce pileup of that
So I guess
paper.
maybe we look at that budget, that IT budget, to satisfy your, making sure that every department's getting a fair share of the budget
Mhm.
in developing the workflows, and then ensuring that the backlog is that fair? Because that 350 should cover, that's a big number.
Yes, I
That's
believe it
approved.
can.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
believe
that
it
shouldn't be a huge contract expansion to say that this is
No.
an El Segundo-wide contract. You can include the clerk's office and the fire department. We all have a requirement to shrink this giant cabinet of paper.
Right.
And that will ease, I mean, that feeds naturally into one that I think is probably important that goes right, and that's the records retention issue, which is a liability issue.
And then what you could do is, if you have an over, like, at some point, if that free 350 is not sufficient, you can come back and ask for additional funds under the guise of that program, that
Project.
approved project.
Okay, I can do that.
So I think we're saying eliminate the Laserfish line items on the document titled allocation of unallocated general fund reserves.
Yeah.
Just and use the funds we have in IT and ensure that, and if not, then we can circle back on that, right? Okay.
Because that should be the comprehensive project. It should be the identification of the workflow, the uploading, implementation of the new system, as well as the cleanup of the backlog.
And fire has a requirement as well, so that's for the clerk's office and fire.
How mu- if so how- if we
So
eliminate?
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I just want to clarify one thing too. We could use also for legislative consultants related to workflows and destruction.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Laserfish.
I mean, it should be comprehensive. Laserfish, it doesn't matter what it is.
Okay.
So that's another 20,000 from your group. That's 75,000 to the good.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's number 1 and 2 here.
Number one, number two, and then if you look at the fire department, $25,000 towards the Laserfish.
Okay.
So
Is
that's
everyone
all-
good on that one?
That falls under the IT budget. So we're spending your money, Charles.
And then if there's a problem with that, Greg, what's the protocol? Like, you'll come back to us and say, time out, we have an issue, we oversimplified this or something?
I'd probably come back at mid-year with a end-of-year update on what we expended last year, what the savings are, and ask for those to be reallocated.
Okay, thank you.
But that would, I think because that IT budget was already approved, that 350 is already approved, we can start moving forward today on the Laserfish cleanup. So the money's there for all departments to get started on that whole reprocessing, redeployment, and
Yeah,
backlog.
I believe that last year's Laserfish project was focused on planning and building and PD, right, Charles? Because they had the biggest backlog of documents to get through. So now I think you're thinking about using that 350, but spreading it out amongst other departments.
Well, it sounds like the clerk's office is having a difficult time keeping up with like public records requests and other compliance issues.
Well, this was originally put in to combine Laserfish as we moved to Laserfish for document imaging, but also retention and destruction, because we have records that it's time to destroy. And we want to set up a records retention and use Laserfish to, when things are moved in, or get rid of the paper and have it automatically destroy the documents
Yeah. And overall,
across departments.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, overall, we have a pretty good start. Again, we've started, we're continuing with PBS, fire, I'm sorry, not fire, but police has already started with respect to their scanning. They've optimized some of their front-end processes so that they won't continue to pile up the paperwork. We'll do the same with PBS. We'll take a look at Mona's area as well. And as previously discussed, if it's not enough money to execute, we can come back mid-year
Right.
and make an additional request.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
All right, Laserfish, what's the next item?
Professional services.
Professional services.
So can that fall under the,
Yeah, well, when I
What do you
did that
think?
math on that, let me tell you when I got to that roughly $750,000, I had economic development, all 3 positions in there. That's a change in the economic development manager. It's adding the economic development specialist, adding the communication management analyst, finance, part-time office specialist, full-time admin specialist, which were both of those were offset by changes in finance because he was able to eliminate a licensed permit specialist. $83,000 in HR management analyst, IS 66 2090, convert intern to full-time admin specialist. Fire, 19,000 for a plan checker. Library, that's a change there, or I don't know if it was an extra person or additional hours, but library, 18,100, change to part-time staff. Planning, $25,000 for a consultant. This is a crime prevention plan check consultant. 3163 to reclass someone to a senior administrator. Police, 82,132 increase to contractual services crime analyst. So that's, I guess, professional services. No, that would be a head count. 92,893 CSI property officer. Rexon Park, 50,700, 2 new part-time PERS enrolled positions. And then Public Works, 3,800 to upgrade to someone to a senior admin specialist, or from an admin specialist to admin tech support. So all those that I just mentioned made up that 777,000. And then if you backed out the 46,000 for finance, you're at like 730. So which one were you talking about, Carol, when you said professional?
It was just the number 3, the develop specific strategic work.
Oh, I'm sorry.
plan goals.
Okay.
We wanted to stop you, though.
$30,000.
You're on a
Down
roll.
the line.
Okay.
But
Can
I was
you-
wondering if that was part of the $200,000, because it's develop specific strategic work plan goals. Wouldn't that fall under
The same thing.
employee engagement, or
Oh.
is that different?
Let's
I mean, I'm
ask-
okay with it. but-
Mona?
Yeah. Mo, did you want to address this one? This is item 3 on that list, develop specific strategic work plan goals.
Yes, that's when we wanted to use management partners, and you already told us you'd prefer to wait till HR develops an overall
Mhm.
plan.
I'm okay
Previous
with that.
one.
I don't know about you, Chris. Number 3,
What was the suggestion on number 3?
to allow it.
To allow it? Yeah, I certainly have no objection to orienting people in the right direction on that.
Me neither.
So, okay.
Okay.
Number 4, electronic kiosks for public records to be placed in City Hall Quad. I'm not a fan of that, because I think everybody goes online.
Well, I guess here's my big question is our wonderful display of paper in the window, does that replace that?
Correct,
It does.
yes.
So the hodgepodge of stickers and
Yeah, it
tape
wouldn't,
and
it's not electronic. We could do electronic and paper, but it's more, we have to post a paper notice of meetings. So we could do it centralized in the quad for all the city addresses, rather than having paper posted at Recreation and Parks, at the police department, here, wherever there's going to be a meeting at a city hall facility. We could do it in that one kiosk area in the quad, we were thinking.
I like that. I think it's smart.
So we have to, by law, do it by in paper?
Currently, right now, we have to do something where someone can walk up to a central location or the building and know there's a meeting taking place.
And if there was an emergency, I know we've talked in the past about all technology fails. I know this is right in your wheelhouse, Chris, but this could also be the go-to place that
Mhm.
people for bulletins or, okay.
Okay.
I
So
think
you
it's
want to
smart.
create build a
Yeah, a little,
message board?
yeah, message board.
Almost like Rexon Park has, where stuff's behind the windows, kind of, right? But not.
Well,
this is
yeah,
electronic.
Kind of like it would,
It's
be
both,
its
I think.
own standalone. You know the sign that's out there that tells you the signs and everything?
Mhm.
Kind of something along those lines where people would know. Let's say they're here for an event or for Halloween frolic, or they're here for the farmer's market. They could wander in there and look and see what's going on. in City
So
Hall.
is it going to be like a screen technology, like LED or I mean, like LCD?
Well,
or
we
is
could
it-
look into both. Honestly, that cost quote I gave you wasn't looking into the LED.
So
It
it's
was honestly
constructing some
Yes.
kiosk, essentially.
Or
Okay.
they come already constructed. It's just a matter of installing it in a small, informal bid process.
Okay.
And it's been costed at $12,000?
Well, that's what we're estimating, based on.
What else does it do?
Huh?
Can you drive it? $12,000 for a sign?
So I
I
guess we're easily confused. First off, sorry for speaking
Okay.
for you guys. You're talking it's like 3 walls. You walk in, you're still posting paper there, but because it's in a central location, you don't have to post paper at the police department here and
Correct.
somewhere else.
Correct.
So there's really nothing electronic or interactive about
No,
it.
we could honestly look into that, but I don't know what that would require to do electronic. If
So
you're
it
doing
almost
something
look
out in
like a
the middle of
bus
the quad.
stop or something.
In a little.
Right,
yeah.
okay. I guess I'm just trying to
How does
envision
it-
this where someone, because you said someone can walk inside of it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say someone walks inside
Okay.
of it. They could walk up to it.
Okay.
So, and find out what's going on.
So my only, I mean, I totally understand the concept, and I agree that we probably need a centralized place for posting of notices. But if we're thinking about doing something with the quad or the civic center anyway, as far as enhancing it in any manner, we may want to do it at that time.
Yeah, because I mean, I could think too, piggybacking off of the idea of our new website's coming. We're going to want to engage the public more. If we wanted to do this the right way, we would create kind of a central hub where someone could come in and maybe they would be able to navigate the city's website while seeing all the public notices. I don't know. I know I'm getting a little crazy, but
Just
Sure.
Time
So we
check,
can-
guys,
okay.
4:20, so.
we're never going to get anything.
So I'm
4:21.
going to say no on that one.
Okay, Scott's a no.
No.
Chris?
No.
No, it is. Remodel of city clerk's office, $14,000, reconfigure desk and install.
Yes.
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 I want Mona to enjoy the last couple of years.
Do it for 13,000 and Scott will make the door.
What?
Joking. Don't mind
Gotta-
that.
I have a door and a saw.
Current economic development manager, upgrade the position to ED and communications officer or deputy city manager, 18,500.
So the next three sort of work together.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a new program, which is to have a centralized communications role, to have it managed out of the city manager's office. Which means we're going to be doing less economic development with our economic development manager, and we're hoping to backfill that lost time with that third position, which is the lower level
And
coordinator position.
And this goes back to the point where they'll be picking up some responsibilities that are happening today in different departments. So there could be savings of time allotment, and hopefully by centralizing it, you'll have you'll actually be more efficient.
Right.
I looked at this and thought to myself, wow, we're all going to be very pleased because it's going to help us accomplish the goals that we set out in our strategic planning. And I thought, how strategic was it that we did that planning prior to this budget? So now we're in our own internal tug of war between our goals and actually how much money it's going to cost us to achieve those goals. So when I first looked at this, I thought, because the new website is not done yet, and a lot of this has to do with communication through the new website, I thought for this next fiscal year, I'm comfortable with the upgrade of the position and adding one person, and then I would rather you come back halfway through the year and say, hey, we actually do need this other person, let's go, because otherwise I'm thinking these two people they're not going to have that much to do until this website is up and running, and we're at least 6 months away from the website.
So you want to
happening.
revisit like mid-year, Scott? Is
That's what I would, yeah, I'm okay with a raise and one human added, one position added.
Carol? Or Chris?
I concur with Scott. I think the economic development manager upgrade is well worth doing. I think reinforcing what that job of the intern is currently doing as a full-time position, as the full-time economic development specialist, is something who's going to be 100% utilized and well warranted. I share a wee bit of skepticism on the communications management analyst. Not that that position isn't warranted. I think we do need one, but considering we have people who are already functioning as communicators inside, I wonder if when the new technology comes on board, if that person already lives here. So I think that position we kind of agree exists. I don't know that we need to fund it yet.
Carol?
I concur.
So consensus is that we are going to go forward with upgrade on the position of 18,500, adding the economic development specialist of 128,000, and then revisiting mid-year the need for a communication management analyst. Did I get that right?
And I think what our hope is that when it comes to mid-year, we can identify roles and responsibilities that were happening within other departments and how they're being moved. The functions are being moved and centralized. And this is how we're going to hopefully fund it, by moving a position
Okay.
along with it.
You guys got that? Greg?
Yeah, just for clarification, you're okay with that $150,000 being new money rather than the exercise of identifying $150,000
No,
in savings?
I think that stands regardless.
Okay.
Am I right about that?
Well, that department basically doesn't exist right now. It's a department of one, and so I think that is, if we want to achieve our goals, we have to be willing to bite the bullet of new money in that position.
Yeah, I think you just contradicted what I said. We start out the discussion saying that any new increases, regardless of the line item,
have
whether or
to
not
find
we
it
approve
somewhere
them, they
else.
have to find it elsewhere. Are you saying you don't think that's the case for this line item?
Well, but I think we just found it elsewhere.
No, what he's saying is maybe there's a position that we're eliminating that will cover the cost. Or there's an expense that we're cutting that will pay for the cost.
Got it. Sorry. Yes. And I
Okay.
contradicted you.
That's okay. So you're okay though with what we said?
Yes, I am okay with what you
Okay.
said.
So we're gonna, like Carol said, mid-year, we'll hold off mid-year, and I think everyone up here said, and we'll reevaluate the communications role and internal candidates, or something along those lines. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, next up is the annual marketing and tourism allocation, $300,000.
I concur.
Me too, and this is not an ongoing, this is one time, and I do not think this money needs to be found elsewhere. Doesn't have any purchasable costs associated with it. I agree with this. Is everyone on board with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Scott?
Yes.
Great. Item 9 is the city management recruitment. Everybody on board?
Yep.
Yes.
Just real quick, Joe, are you keeping a tally of how much money we're spending here?
Thanks, Carol. Let's see. Full-time license permit specialist. Okay, this is this is a
Salary
salary
savings.
savings.
So,
Thanks,
yes.
Joe. Yes. So Joe already found the money for these next two positions. Do we need to discuss them?
No.
Part-time?
No.
Okay.
And he has some leftover money.
Yeah, that's right.
Good job.
The annual Net Promoter Score business and resident satisfaction surveys one time. That 25,000 is, Greg, not just the periodic survey that we did, but also recurrent transactional based as well.
The transactional base
Oh,
one
it's
is
right below it.
there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And is that based on a proposal from the vendor we used last time?
Yes, correct.
So, okay, 46,000. And everyone okay with that?
When was the last time we did one of these?
November
Almost a year.
of last year.
Yeah, almost a year.
That was the first time, so we have our benchmark.
We've
our
only
Net
done it
Promoter
once,
Score
yeah.
benchmark.
Right.
I think we should continue to do them until we get to a point where we don't need to do them anymore, where we're actually doing it like, we have our finger on the pulse. I
Well,
still
we could
think
probably develop our own methodology
Yeah.
too at some point, I would think.
it's still a new function, a new process.
Mhm. Well, we did get, Chris and Scott, I don't know to what extent you weren't on council yet, but we got some really good feedback from that in terms of a quantitative score from the residents and the businesses, and a whole bunch of good qualitative comments that some were pretty surprising actually. So to the good and, for opportunities. So, okay, is everyone on board with continuing with that for
Yep.
this next
Yes.
year? Okay. Annual review and update to the cost allocation plan of the citywide schedule of fees and services. This is similar to the exercise we just went through with the outside firm.
Yes, but this is a much smaller scale.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. UUT compliance audit, one time.
Yes.
Scott?
I'm nodding.
Yes,
Sorry.
me too. Okay,
And then the other two were canceled, deleted, right?
right. Part-time HR management analyst to full-time senior analyst. I feel strongly about this one. I think we are really understaffed in that department.
Isn't this a
Concur.
current position that we just don't have filled?
I mean, how many opens do we have currently in HR?
So we have the HR director, HR manager, and this part-time position, which is currently being filled with the contract staff.
Okay. I think we need it.
Everyone on board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Number 15 is the professional and technical services consultants to address project implementations. 200. We talked about this one last time. This one
Yeah.
had a fair amount of detail associated with it. Any questions, concerns?
I think the nuts and bolts of that was that we need these people, and possibly some of them will become. They'll fill some of those full-time spots that we have open, but in the meantime, they're here to get the projects that
Projects
are
done.
already on, in the hopper done.
Yeah, I don't think any of these are meant to be recurring, right?
No.
These are
These
contractual.
are one-time consultants, bring on a project, implement
Okay.
the project, deploy.
Great. Thanks, Charles. Okay. Convert intern position to full-time admin specialist, IS department. This would have the same caveat as before, right?
Yeah,
So,
find it,
yeah.
find it somewhere else.
Chris, you good?
Yeah, I think that eventually this person reappears once all of those projects come to fruition and those consultants start melting away. This person naturally becomes one. I almost, if we have an intern there who's already be invested in the startup of this, is that person, do we shoot ourselves in the foot a bit by delaying having them as a full-time equivalent? I suppose my inclination is to defer a bit to the department head who says he's got these projects going forward and has an intern who's already vested in them and wants to work in it. I think the chart showed that. So I would be inclined to approve it.
Okay. I think we're all in favor of that one. Okay. Right?
But he has to find,
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, no,
The same caveat holds true, which is each one of these that we say yes to, we got to find the funds elsewhere.
So I have to make sure that I'm clear, then, so we're not adding those dollars to the budget.
Right.
We're
Right.
taking the existing budget and finding.
Yes. Okay. Fire department accreditation program. I got a little bit more information from Chief Donovan. Thank you, Chris, for that on the program. I think there are only, I can't remember, 3 or 5 programs, one of the two. 3 in LA County, right? And it's, it's really going through an assessment of how capable we are and where the opportunities are with our staff, et cetera. I mean, I would prefer to be in a little bit better situation with our pension liabilities and some of these other things, but I'm going to defer to the council on this one, see what you guys think. I think, Chris, did you say it was about 100 all in, 140, 150 over 3 years? Do you mind? Thank you.
Yeah, it goes to 25,000 next year. Is that right? For the second increment.
Correct. Year one's a heavy lift. We're anticipating 106,000, of which about 95,000 is consulting fees to do the studies. There's accreditation agency fee. There is some training for staff. That's all one-time fee. It dropped substantially year 2. We're anticipating less than 10,000 year 2, and probably down from there year 3 and beyond. So we're anticipating a 3-year process that's all in about $125,000 to $130,000.
And after the 3-year program, the fire, the employees, I was trying to think of what their name is, they will be accredited in,
The department becomes accredited.
Okay,
So
the department.
at the end of the 3 years, we would go through and assume we get accredited through a peer assessment process. We become an accredited fire department. And as the mayor mentioned, there are 3 departments in Los Angeles County right now which are accredited. There are a few more that are in process. And then this is an ongoing process where each year you continue to review and make sure you're maintaining the efforts to provide the best service to the community. So there are small fees in the thousands, hundreds to $1,000 per year for ongoing accreditation processes. So this is not a one-time deal. This is an ongoing evolution of continual improvement and making sure that we're staffed appropriately, that we have the right deployment models, that we are employing, this is I know probably an overused term, but the best management practices in the industry, and that we are indeed, pound for pound, the best fire department for the community.
And does this accreditation also include a overview of our technology and how we are comparative to, from a
Yeah.
technology standpoint?
Yeah, there are 10 succinct, definitive areas that you study, and one of them is literally in depth of policies, procedures, technology, the way that we make decisions internally and move decision processes through the organization. So it goes from a macro review to a micro review of the organization. If you would equate this to a forensic audit of a financial book, you're doing the same thing to the fire department.
And when's the last time we did this?
This has never been done before.
Okay, so
It's really the only third-party assessment that you have, more or less?
That's
for your
correct.
department. Does police have anything similar? Do you know, Chief? Just curious. Wait, don't go too far, Chris. I think we might have questions about the next two. Please, thank you.
There is a national accreditation for police. I'm just not ready to recommend moving forward with that yet.
Okay, thank you. Is similar cost, Chief? Sorry. Is it similar? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. More questions for Chief? Any thoughts on it?
Who pays attention to this? I mean, are the residents of El Segundo be like, yeah, our fire department's accredited? Or do applicants go, hey, I want to go there because they have that accreditation? Tell me, like, is this a blue ribbon that we get to wear, but nobody cares?
That's a great question. So the first thing that we would do we would take the accreditation and go back to ISO, the Internal Insurance Service Organization that does the rating of organizations that sets insurance rates for commercial properties. And we would say to the ISO, we are now an accredited department. And many of the departments have found that there's tremendous benefit. They actually go up in the rating. So we're currently a 3. The anticipation is we would go up to a 2, maybe. I doubt we'd get to a 1, but perhaps to a 1 on ISO. So that's one that would have a direct benefit to the business community. Secondly, for the city council to communicate to the community and to the business sector to say that we're an accredited organization. I think from an economic driver to bring new business into the community, to say that you have an accredited fire department, there's some tremendous benefit to that. It says that we have studied our department, we've looked at deployment, we looked at our training, we've looked at our internal practices and policies, and we can justify our existence. So from a business perspective, you want to come and move into El Segundo because we know that we have a outstanding fire and life safety, and from recruitment for the fire service. And granted, we're in a unique situation that the fire service is to the benefit of recruitment, that we are currently testing for firefighter, and we kept recruitment open for 2.5 hours, and we filled the number of applicants that we're interviewing right now. The real question, though, is it quality or is it quantity? And we're driving in right now to determine that we're making sure we have quality applicants. And granted, we do robust backgrounds and we do a lot of training, and I stand behind the people of our organization, but moving forward, we want to make sure that we're still a desirable organization. I think that's one of the ways to do it.
Which was the agency that, you sent me a video on one of them, I can't remember
Anaheim.
what. Was it Anaheim?
That's one
Yeah.
of them.
Big agency. Can you give us a sense of what were the results that came out? It wasn't like you need to add a couple $1 million in capital to your
Well,
department, was it?
for Anaheim, they did. They
wow.
determined that they had some need to move a fire station for a deployment strategy. We're not going to have that issue here. We're deployed. Our stations are in the right location. But larger departments like Anaheim, particularly as organizations see undeveloped areas become developed, they use the accreditation process, and particularly the standards of response cover plan, to justify where they build fire stations and deploy resources. So we're built out for the most part. We won't see that benefit. But like Anaheim, what they were able to do really is use the accreditation process in a community outreach, and they spent a lot of time doing community outreach and engaging with their with their residents to talk about where's the fire service going? What are the services that we're developing and delivering today that will be changing and modifying, and things that we should be thinking about in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years of service delivery. So Anaheim did a lot of study about future casting service delivery. I think that would be beneficial for our city.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Chief on that one?
I mean, I like it in that it helps establish future goals, and, I mean, you're not going to fix everything right away, but it'll give you an idea of where you should be developing your fire department for the future.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
I don't have any questions. No.
Okay, any, all in favor? Who's in favor? Yes, over
Yes.
there?
Yes,
It's a massive number.
it is a massive.
I mean, comparing us to and a department like Anaheim, deployment strategies and future goals, we've got tremendous response times, tremendous proficiency. If we are not the gold standard for towns of 17,000 by night, I can't imagine what that must look like. So I think, like most people, if this was $105,000 or $25,000 for specific training, specific gear, specific things like that, I think I would be more tend to do it. To audit necessarily a process that I suspect the outcomes will be tweaks around the edges from people who are already incredibly experienced. You know, it seems like a nice to have in an era where our nice to haves, I mean, 105,000 is, if you take that 12,500 for every man, woman, and child in El Segundo, you know, that's 8 people who suddenly can write off that check.
Or
because of
it's
this.
70,000 in interest over time savings. Yeah.
So
can
it's
we
not that
come-
I
can we come back?
I don't dispute
Yeah.
the value by at all.
Carol's got a suggestion. Maybe we come back midterm.
Yeah.
Park it.
We'll
or
just park
mid-year?
it as we go through this and
Okay.
see where we
All right.
are
Let's
with
do
our
that.
money
Okay. Thanks.
Thank
Chief.
you.
on our tally.
Okay, let's see. Next one is professional.
We
No,
already
sorry,
jumped that.
enhanced wellness program. Yeah, you touched on this, Greg. Chief, sorry, you're up again. The difference between this and what your plans are with the employee engagement, 200,000.
So this is specific to the fire department. We've identified, we brought back through a current wellness program that was initiated this year, annual medicals for the staff, which we think is extremely beneficial. The next step of this is we've looked at our work comp exposure. We have, it's a dangerous job. We have firefighters that get injured. I've used this analogy, maybe it's wearing out, but we look at this like our neighbors next door to Station 2, the Lakers. They spend an awful lot of time making sure that the players are in the right physical condition to be on the floor to play, and when they're injured to make sure they're back on the floor. We're taking that same approach, and what this recommendation is literally using the same company that the Lakers use. It's embedded within UCLA Health. It's a company called Exos, and they do exercise physiology, nutrition, a whole host of individualized physical fitness and wellness. There's a mental health component that we're bringing into this, all of which with the intent to make sure that our firefighters are healthy and fit and well, mentally, physically, emotionally. And quite frankly, my goal is to drive down our work comp exposure. Right now, we're on the higher end, and I would like to work to bring that down. And this is a small investment, I think, in bringing down that work comp.
Comments?
Now, is this, this isn't something we could do in tandem with the police department?
I'm sure it's scalable. This is strictly for fire, though, ma'am. We looked at this. This particular company does work with the Lakers. They do work with military, and they do work with the fire departments.
Okay.
We can certainly ask to see if they do work with the law enforcement.
Chris?
You know, all I think too is the overwhelming majority of our retirees on the fire service have a lifetime disability accommodation, and anything that we can do to preserve their health, not only is it in their benefit, but it's also in our financial interest. So I think that this, you know, when we look at the numbers of what $55,000 means in terms of any one of those settlements to accommodation, it is penny wise and pound foolish. So it's a tough number to look at, but the other numbers are way tougher.
Yeah.
Do you already have a quote from them, Chief?
Yes, sir.
That's what this is based on? Okay.
So I'm a yes.
Okay, I'm a yes, too. All right.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. And then last one for you, Chief, I think is, no, we
he's
have
got
2
some big
more.
ones.
Plan check.
Oh, yeah, we have quite a few. Yeah, plan checker.
That's certainly, if we would like to put that aside and use some cost savings, we can figure out how we can manage our workload. Again, this was set up to add consulting hours to a contract that we already have. We can certainly manage the workload.
That's contracted, though. That's not headcount.
Correct.
That's just additional.
Correct.
And what does the plan checker do?
Well, and is it really ongoing, or are you asking for this 1 year?
We have found that last year we had some long-term vacancies in critical staff that do the plan check for us. So we want to keep in par with making sure that our folks coming in and do new construction, they have quick turnaround times. So this gives us that opportunity to make sure if we have a vacancy, unanticipated vacancy, that we can use the consultant. So for plan checking, but certainly we can look at this at a later time.
I think
I think do it.
I think we're all okay with it, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we're all okay with that. Thank you. Replacement fire engine. Any questions, comments, concerns?
It's not taking any money out of the general.
Yeah.
It's not. This is only based on the depreciation model, though. There's nothing wrong with the vehicle right now. It's a reserve vehicle. There's no task tension to it.
Yeah, what else could you use that 800 grand for, if not a fire engine?
Well, the monies are set for equipment replacement. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, what other kind of equipment could you purchase?
Helicopter.
Can we purchase all these self-contained breathing apparatus parts? The vehicle
that's gonna be-
stabilization struts and the technical rescue airbags?
we could.
What about, like, no, that was fire. I can't remember, the equipment replacement, are they fire, and is it public safety one bucket or fire separate from?
We're separate.
You're separate, okay.
So we look at our frontline apparatus. We've worked out a depreciation schedule. We keep them in frontline status for 10 years, reserve status for 10 years. The department, like many of the other departments, fell behind through the recession. So we've been working diligently to catch up. This is partly funded through equipment replacement. A majority of it, though, is strike team reimbursement monies. Those monies can only be used for fire apparatus. We can't use that money for equipment. So
Is there any gear that you could buy for the firefighters themselves that would be an upgrade? That's,
no, sir.
no?
Next year, we're anticipating self-contained breathing apparatus, and we have money set aside for that. So we would be anticipating bringing forth a replacement for the SCBA next year. We've looked at replacement PPE, getting each firefighter with 2 pair of PPE. That's the yellow fire gear that you see. We have a staggered plan moving forward we're not going to do that this year, but we'll incorporate additional monies in future years to get all firefighters into 2 sets of gear.
How much would that cost in total to outfit all 15? Is it 15?
No, there would be 49 employees.
That's
I
way off.
don't have the exact number in front of me. We're probably looking at probably $150,000 to $200,000.
But could we use these, if we wanted to get all that all at once, could we use this? Because Chris's point resonates with me that the engine's still in good shape, the one we have, right?
Well, I'll say that I'll take the different approach in saying that we're at a place now where repairs are beginning to accumulate, and we're beginning to see those costs rise. And so to us, if we don't replace that fire apparatus, and here's a really important distinction to other departments. When you hear the word reserve apparatus, it's not parked in the back, never used. It's literally an additional frontline piece of equipment. So when a fire engine goes out on a strike team, that reserve goes into frontline status. When a fire engine's taken out of service for periodic maintenance or for a major repair, that piece of equipment goes into frontline status. So consider it a frontline piece of equipment in the number 2 spot. And we think that it's important that we replace this fire engine this year. This will give us a really solid position for probably the next 8 to 10 years for our large, which are the most expensive pieces of equipment in the city. We think that this is the right time to replace that second number 2 piece of equipment.
Well, and it takes quite a while for this. It'll take a good.
It's at least a year to get the unit
And then
in
is
play.
the cost, if we do this, if we wait?
It'll
the-
go up. It's going up between 3% and 6% a year.
Okay.
And then these, you would sell the additional, what happens with the surplus funds from the?
Public Works surpluses it, but quite frankly, you don't get a whole lot of money on the secondary market for these apparatus.
Do you have any sense of how much those maintenance expenses are, Chief, on that?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay, let's see.
How old is Frontline engine now that's going to become back row?
It's a 10-year-old engine.
Got it.
So it's going to be 11 years old. So it'll go into reserve status. So with this purchase, we are now back onto our normal depreciation schedule for large apparatus.
And we won't buy another apparatus this size for a decade?
Correct.
Okay,
And the money's there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I say yes.
all right, Carol says yes. Scott, what say you?
I'm going to say yes.
Yes, okay, I'll say yes. I'm not, Chris? It
The
doesn't matter.
B-52H my father flew in 1972 is flying over Syria right now. I went to war in a Vietnam.
Leaking
War in
hydraulic
1976.
fluid all over those poor people. I'm just
$1
kidding.
million for maintenance, but not a $50 billion plane. You know, if we had maintainers up here from the city saying that this vehicle was not mission capable and it was a lot queen and they're spending all their time fixing parts of it, I would not be averse to moving forward with a replacement. But given that it is not, and understanding it still has a frontline requirement, but it is still functioning, there's nothing that says we loot this $800,000 equipment pool. It's just something we can carry forward. Every extra year you get out of a vehicle is an extra year you get out of a vehicle. I mean, it's a money you don't have to spend down the road.
Guess what I
Well, then,
struggle with
The
is-
vehicle coming up behind it is in far worse shape, as I understand it, the truck. And that thing is something that is a problem, and will also have a second life. This thing is just an actuarial casualty for its time in service.
Well, can I ask a silly question?
Yeah, and by
Hold
the
on,
way,
Chief's
the
got a
truck is not in worse shape.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. I stand corrected on the
Yeah,
truck.
artillery-drawn aerials maintained well. It's in good shape, good frontline status.
Look at
Okay,
that.
Chris,
Just saved
I mean-
140.
Scott, you
The
had
truck
something?
that we would take out of service, would it make any sense at all to keep that truck in reserve status and send it on with strike teams out so we have the other two still here and use it until it dies and then surplus it?
So it's a great point. We spoke to the crews that just got back off the front line, and they said that our latest engine that we just built, because it has a shorter wheelbase and it's really designed for that type of service, was far superior from an operational perspective and for firefighter safety. So we would recommend sticking with the unit that was built for in town, but also with the shorter wheelbase that makes it ideal for strike team deployments.
I guess I'm just trying to think, if you're saying there's really no resale value for it, then maybe it holds more value to us, sending guys, picking up overtime hours and having the state pay us for their time using the older engine on those strike teams versus a new engine that then we're gonna incur
Sure.
those maintenance costs.
I would probably surmise that there's a higher likelihood of it breaking down when it's deployed up on large-scale brush fires. So you're driving, 300, 400, 500 miles, and it's being deployed into pretty tough terrain. It's a 20-year-old fire engine. It probably would be tested substantially.
Can we donate it to a city and get a tax write-off, Joe?
We don't pay taxes. We don't pay income tax.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, but
I'll
yes.
buy it. I'll buy it
It's
for you.
something.
We'll drive it
Get
around
like a
in the
thank you.
parade.
Can we give it to our sister city in
I think
Mexico?
I think we've done that in the past, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or how about Chevron with it? Well, they don't want, they probably don't.
Their stuff's newer than
It
ours.
doesn't meet their gallon per minute requirement.
Okay.
They
All right,
have,
we have consensus on
Okay.
that one.
Sorry.
Thank you. on my
The REMS vehicle, 140,000. Do you still need it? Sounds like maybe that thing is in better shape than the engine.
No, the REMS vehicle is an important specialty piece of equipment for when we deploy out on the strike teams. We send a special unit that their job is to rescue firefighters on the front line. And for instance, the last deployment, we actually had to rent a pickup truck and load it with our equipment. So this vehicle would replace a rather old utility truck, and we would put it in frontline status.
Chris, if you do both these, how much money will you have left? Or Joe, how much money will be left in the ERF?
So, well, he's gonna tap into the total amount that's set aside for this particular piece of equipment. So we'd have to start that allocation of funding all over again.
So no money. There's zero money in there now. I'm
For that
confused.
particular,
but
Piece of
they was set
equipment.
aside for that equipment.
So there's actually.
So there, because it's past its depreciation life, there is money set aside for this, right? Full
Yes.
value or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a $140,000 pickup truck?
It's specially outfitted. It's expensive. Plus, it has some specialty equipment associated with it.
So it's not just the truck.
It's a utility pickup truck with custom boxes on the side and then some rescue equipment associated with it. So all-wheel drive, lifted a bit, figure eight going off-road and affecting rescues. It'll have a winch on the front, special lighting packages. So it's a rugged truck.
Okay.
Chris?
I mean, I thought this one was far more important than the last one, I knew they had to rent the other truck. That's what I was alluding to. And I said that this one is a higher priority than the one that's just aging out, not failing out. So I think this one is the one that to me was far more justifiable in its use. And it's funded, I mean, it's a self-funding element. I mean,
Right.
it goes out, we get money from the fire service. It's effectively a push for the El Segundo taxpayer, as opposed to the other one, which is funded partly by strike force, but partly by budget allocation that comes from funding it. So, when we zero out that $800,000 one, we have to start funding the next one.
That's a good point. You know what? I want to reconsider that. Sorry, Chris, hate to do this to you, but the $800,000, I want to think about that one a little bit longer. I'm going to defer on that, if I can, till we meet again. Is that okay? I want to get a little more information on that one, and I don't want to use the remaining 4 minutes that we have to discuss it. Technical rescue airbags, vehicle stabilization strut, self-containing breathing apparatus.
So yes on the 140?
Yes, on the 140, right? Okay.
Yes.
TBD on the other one. Thanks, Carol.
I go yes on all the other ones. Airbag struts, breathing apparatus parts.
Well, you asked earlier, I think you did or Carol did, could you use the equipment, well, forget it. We already talked about that. All right, so everyone okay with all three items, airbag, struts, and self-contained breathing apparatus?
Yes.
Yes.
Chris said yes, I am a yes, okay. Thanks, Chief, appreciate
Thank
that. Library, discussion regarding revision to part-time staff,
That's the clerical error one?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, same caveat though, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, this was actually a correction in our budget.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
extra expenditure here. It's
Ah,
moving
yes,
from
that's
one
right.
box to another. So it's-
Okay, thank you.
So they found the money for it already.
That's right. Professional and technical services for building safety, muni permit, system transition, increase in inspections, $105,000 one time. Greg, do you have a suggestion here? We've got about 8 to 10 line items left, not to mention the CIP items, and
Well,
can we delay the closed session a bit?
we can start the closed session a little late, yes.
Okay.
And with respect to professional technical, we are hoping to launch a new permit and plan check software this year, which means the full-time staff in planning and building are going to be very much involved in that process. We need to backfill them. So it truly is a one-time effort to improve that system and the services that department provides.
So this one, professional and technical service for building safety, is it bringing a consultant to do what?
Professional technical services in building and safety division, an increase in inspections. We've had a lot of plan check activities. Sam can come up and answer this probably better, but we have had a lot of plan check activity this year, which means we'll have more construction and inspection activity next year. And then the other part of this is, as we take full-time employees off to focus on setting up a new permit system, someone needs to backfill their positions. Someone's going to do, for example, when the permit desk person is working with the consultant to set up the computer system, we need to bring in a consultant to work at the permit desk.
But didn't we discuss this at the last
Yeah.
meeting when we talked about when we get to budget time and we get to the professional consultant portion of the planning, building, safety budget that we wanted to talk about this? And so now we're basically taking the existing portion of the budget that speaks to consultants and we're asking to add
A lot.
$105,000
No, more,
to
because
that.
it's a three. It's it's 100 plus the 25 plus the 30.
So it's like so it's $160,000 on top of whatever portion of the existing budgetary funds consist of consultant.
Yeah,
fee-
I
fees.
I just worry because I know we're bringing in a new system, and we haven't started the process. We don't know what the system is. We don't know what the capabilities are. We haven't done the process flows. We're basically, I believe, Charles, aren't we like at the infancy stages of that project?
Yeah, we've started, we're probably about 5 or 6 weeks into it, but we have started the gap analysis, right?
Okay.
So we're working with Sam's team, gathering information on their current processes, and, you know, quite frankly, I do see that, you know, there are some resource constraints because I'm competing with what they have to do in their day-to-day job, right?
And the overall timeline that I spoke to Charles about was that end of next fiscal year, we hope to have the system in place. If I could speak about the 105,000, it's kind of broken out into about $15,000 of it was an additional funds that we felt would need for working with our existing vendor for a system that we've had for 16 years. We felt like we needed some additional for the transition to happen from the old system to the new system. So about $15,000 was for that. The rest of it is for $90,000 is, if you recall, our plan check revenue for this year, we're going to be about $670,000 over what we estimated the budget amount to be. And what that tells me is that we've done a lot of large projects in the plan check. And so when plan check revenue is that high, I have to look into the next 12 to 18 months and say, we're going to be really busy on the inspection side. So the rest of the $90,000, we're anticipating that we're going to need some additional consultant funds for additional inspectors. And the last part was, and it's kind of trickled in here, is, as Charles mentioned, is that a lot of cities, when they go onto a new system, everyone is squeezed for time. So what happens is the lowest person, maybe the person who work in the counter, that person is given the responsibility to adopt a new system, and you get a very low quality system. What I'd like to do is have very high level people, the planning manager and the building official, working with our consultants to have a really a quality system. And that's going to take staff resources, which we need some additional backfill with consultants to help so that our customers don't feel that void.
Are those based on proposals for engagement, those numbers, Sam?
In engagement?
Well, I mean, how did you come up with the 55 grand for the,
For the two.
yeah.
55, okay, you're talking about the 25 and 30?
Yeah, I thought that's
Yeah,
where you just.
the other 25,000 is actually for the police department. The police department, who is part of our development team, there's Lori Risk, who's a single person who checks many of our larger projects. And when she's filling other positions with, customer experience with the residents and our commercial people, and we really feel like she needs some additional help with those plan checks. So the police chief and we talked about having a consultant who can help us with the larger commercial projects. So we thought maybe $25,000 would be the right number for that. And lastly, for $30,000, that is actually going to the planning division. And what that will go for is I'll say a good part of our projects, good percentage of our projects go from asking questions to becoming projects. And when they become projects, those costs that we incur from consultants, from CEQA, traffic consultant and whatnot, those are all reimbursed. But there are a percentage of projects that get asked questions and in the information, fact-finding phase, and they don't become projects. And there's no way to get reimbursement for those because that's just customer-friendly from planning and building and safety side. And we felt that $30,000 was the right amount to have in our coffers to be customer-friendly.
So just real quick, so back to Scott's point, so you have a budget normally of X for consulting, and then a couple weeks ago, or about a month ago, you came and asked us for some additional money because.
I did.
Is this additive on top of that?
No, the money that planning asked for additional 50,000, building and safety asked for additional 70,000. That was one-time money to get through this fiscal year, and it was
then-
because of the additional work we felt
So
this
you-
fiscal year.
So then, on the budget for next year, was it the same? Did you budget your needs at the same as last year, or
The-
did you increase it already?
The additional 120,000 that I asked for like a month ago, that money was not accounted for the money that's carried over to next year.
So, but for
So-
when you're
so be-
budgeting your consultant fees so you're coming in at X at the end of this fiscal year with a budget.
Yes,
And in that X includes the 100 and whatever thousand.
120,000 that I asked
That
for
you
last
asked
month?
for, right.
No. And the reason why I'm asking for more this year is that because we were short this year. I'm
that's what I'm
asking for
trying to
more
get to.
next year because we were short this
So-
fiscal year.
So this is just, you're saying this additive is on top of what you had budgeted previous from last year?
Exactly.
Okay.
For
I
base
got
stock, yeah.
you. I got it.
Okay. Thoughts in favor?
It makes sense to me. I say yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everyone, yes? Okay, good, thanks. Reclassification of office specialist to senior administrative specialist, ongoing. Assume that's yes with the
Yes.
same caveat
Same
as
caveat.
earlier. Great, thank you. Then we have let's see, increase to contractual services for police department, Lexipol policy manual renewal, contract crime analyst, ongoing 82,132.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a
Yes.
yes too. Same caveat, everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like he's under on his budget anyways.
Right.
Contract services.
Okay. Thank you. Next one is the CSI property officer non-sworn, ongoing 92,893. I'm a yes for that.
I'm a yes too.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to pay for itself.
Okay. SWAT van.
Yes, it's coming out of a different pool of money. It's already there. I think it's a shiny recruitment tool.
I mean, it's already a shiny recruitment pool. It just doesn't hold the right kind of rifles. And that's the.
I guess the
sticking
same
point.
question
I mean,
holds true. What would we use that money for if not that?
It's more constrained because of the civil asset forfeiture piece. So
Mhm.
it's what we can expend it for. I just don't know that there's an urgency to replace it. You know, when a tactical vehicle goes up, I mean, those are really hard parts to find, and I accept all of those things. But I don't know if we're quite there. We also have two large tactical vehicles. We have an up armor that goes with this. So, you know, the task pressure to replace it.
Chief, do you mind addressing the podium, please? While he's coming up, the next one, personnel requests, 50,700. Do you guys want to, does anyone feel strongly with the same caveat as before to approve, or do you want to hold off and discuss that?
I'll approve it if they
I'd
can
approve
find
this.
the money within.
Okay.
Same.
Carol?
As long as the money comes within.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
So in regards to the SWAT van, yes, it does deploy with the armored vehicle that we share with Area G. However, that armored vehicle, the SWAT van is a storage vehicle. So it's not a tactical vehicle that forward deploys, it goes to the command post. And the problem we have now is, number one, it can't carry the munitions by federal standards. It's a violation of law. And we can't securely hold our weapons in it, which results in them having to be stored in the station. So in addition to the van breaking down repeatedly and those sorts of things, the idea being that you would actually have a SWAT van, which is a standard in the industry, that can deploy with all of its equipment, as opposed to having to store things in a locker in the back of the police department. And then when there's a SWAT activation, officers have to come here to the station instead of to the scene, and then they have to get all this stuff out, and it creates quite a bit of an extra response time when responding to critical incidents. And because the armored vehicle is not intended to be a storage vehicle, so that also doesn't meet the requirements for long-term storage for what we would need. That's more of a rescue vehicle that would forward deploy on a tactical incident.
Thank you. I'm in favor.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
Okay. Chris, you don't have to answer unless you want to. We have consensus.
You got plenty of votes, Victor. You got plenty of votes.
All right. 20, thanks, Chief. Wait, hold on. We might have another one.
No, that's police
Oh,
department's
no,
done.
sorry. Thanks, Chief. Okay, upgrades current senior admin specialist to admin technical specialist, Public Works, 3,800. I assume everyone's going to be the same?
Yes.
Which is,
Yes.
okay. Okay, now, I think what we need to do is probably do some calculations, Joe, and come back to the CIPs at a later date. Greg, do you have an idea of when we could do that?
We do it on the 18th?
Well, how much are we at right now?
I have 1.1, about $1.2 million of the 1.765 of general fund.
There might be some discussion, Carol, about, like, I know that Ken and Greg don't feel confident that the $1 million, for example, that's set aside for the citywide facilities repairs is going to be sufficient once we get those assessment results back. And we talked about the skate park in the past as a high utilization, high density, footprint item. And I think we could get into another probably hour and a half discussion just
On
based on how we're going to
Yeah.
do some of these capital improvements.
When is that assessment going to be done? The facilities, citywide facilities assessment?
We'd expect the draft to council by the end of the year and a final in February, March. So mid-year.
Because we could be finding something like crazy.
We would expect to have some urgent things to do.
Yeah.
That's why that $1 million is included in the CIP for your
Yeah.
consideration.
The other thing is, I don't believe, like, as
Savings.
another example, I don't know if there's more money allocated to downtown. There's still some improvements that can be made there, for example. So I would just suggest that we defer, we regroup once
do a
Joe and
CPAC.
Greg, yeah. So when can we do that, Greg?
Can we do it next?
We could do it at 12 a.m. when we finish open session.
Probably a special meeting?
I don't
Tomorrow.
have any plans.
Tomorrow at 12:01.
Next week,
Yeah.
sometime?
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Well, we can poll the council and their availability for a special meeting next week.
I mean,
We'd like
nobody,
to adopt on the 18th.
everybody doesn't want to come back tonight after our other meeting is adjourned.
Actually, in all seriousness, that would only require you two, probably, right?
So the 18th, the plan was to come back on the 18th to adopt the budget, but if we don't have clear direction, we can't do that.
Could we come back after,
Tonight?
yeah.
If
Yeah,
all
I
we
think
have to
just
do
have
is
to-
talk about
Just on
capital
the, we're
improvement.
just talking about, we would need staff to be here for that.
Sure.
Well, don't you want to invite them?
Can
though?
we
Well,
continue
yeah,
that,
but I mean, I don't know if they want to be here.
Continue this meeting till the end of the other meeting.
Okay. Everyone okay with that? Chris?
Yeah, they could sleep at your house.
All right. All right. We are, I don't need to use a gavel. We are continuing this meeting till the end of our open session. Thank you.
Going into closed session.
And we're going into closed session. Thank you, Greg. Okay, we are returning to budget session from earlier this afternoon, and we made a lot of progress earlier for the 2 hours we were in budget session mid-afternoon. And we are down to capital improvement projects, right? We made considerable changes to the requests from the departments. And Joe, you want to lead the conversation from here, please?
Drawing review departments cited, so $227,000. City Council decided not to move forward with those department requests. And there was personnel items approved for $417,234 that we're finding the budget within the existing budget. So that leaves $644,234 from department requests that council now has for other discretionary items.
644.
$644,000.
And would it be possible, Joe, to come back with just some track changes to this too?
Absolutely.
So, okay, thank you.
And now we're into the capital improvement discussion where there's $3.1 million being requested. Public Works Director Ken Berkman is here. If If you have any specific questions. So this process did go through the CPAC committee, and these were the recommendations that came out of it.
Okay. So let's just dig right into the first one, citywide
I thought you
facility.
guys said earlier there was some concern about this placeholder amount.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that right before we
Yeah.
broke?
Citywide facilities repairs, $1 million placeholder.
So Ken, how much do you think that placeholder needs to be?
So, as you know, we're in the process of preparing the facility assessment needs citywide. And the $1 million, it's really based on working and with facilities maintenance staff, talking to the consultant. I pictured pretty easily $20 million worth of a capital program coming out of this to spend in, say, 20 years. Because the theory behind the needs, or the condition assessment, let me say, is to produce a urgent or a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, and then a longer-term 20-year plan, and present those plans to council for consideration and budgeting based on priorities citywide. So just linearly taking 20 years and 20 million, we just said $1 million right up front. We've made some very good progress the past couple of years addressing major HVAC equipment, and have made it through a pretty hot and humid summer with staff being comfortable around the town. And I think it's an accurate number to start with, and at mid-year, with that final report coming February, March, certainly we could be exact and accurate with what the immediate needs are. But I think for this year, $1 million would be accurate.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone are there any additions that anyone would like to see to this list? I have a couple thoughts that I would like to see just discussed with the council and considered. Is that okay? You all okay with that?
Go for
Yeah.
it. Funded.
Okay. So one is, I don't
Can
really
Ken
have,
sit down.
yeah.
Mayor Boyles, may I provide an introductory kind of comment? So we went through this with CPAC and resulted in this list and this final $3 million amount. So we have the carryover of projects that we still need to complete from last fiscal year or this fiscal year. Little over $2 million. We have the needs really from master plans like water, sewer, and our street roadway master plans, which are typical and done every year in an amount of about $5 million. And then the items that we're considering here right now, as recommended by CPAC, about $3 million. And I think the point I wanted to make is, as I might have mentioned before, we've been pretty aggressive with our capital program, and it's my responsibility to make sure we are accurately projecting what we can do. I want to be aggressive and make sure we get as much done as we can each year. But I think this, if you total those numbers together and we look at a $10.5 million program, I think that's what we should shoot for here. And I could share with you a few weeks ago, we lost an engineering associate, which is one of our key project manager positions. So we're going to have to go through that recruitment and bring that position up. So if there are additions that council is considering, we need to carefully consider the work level and resources that we have, and perhaps thinking about replacing projects as opposed to adding them, respectfully.
So when you're saying you're able to manage what's approved, so anything under the unfunded, if we move any of those up, is what you're saying? On the unfunded category?
So there, and I'm sorry, I'm not with you, but there are two projects on the unfunded, which are the El Segundo drainage improvement and the skate park repairs.
Oh, okay, no, it says, I guess I'm looking at an older version. Okay.
The ones that are excluded or were excluded were the El Segundo Boulevard drainage improvement, skate park repairs, and other projects. as determined.
Correct.
Here, I just want to throw out a couple out there. I think Councilman Pimentel has some ideas as well. One was for more sidewalks and stop signs, which we talked about a little bit. Stop signs, I've heard from some residents, they're concerned. There are a couple four-way intersections that just have one and seem somewhat dangerous.
Maple and Loma Vista.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also one on Whiting that I've heard a lot about. The other is more for downtown, to be determined, but I know that we convened this downtown task force. They had some great ideas. We put some of those ideas in place, but there's more that could be done to bring
People downtown.
downtown business to life, yes. The third one is more for safety, and what I mean by that is like, not public safety, well, it is public safety, but I think of like multimodal bike. I know we talked about that, Ken, too, and we're trying to do the Sharrows and the bike plan in conjunction with repaving streets in your budget for the enterprise fund, but just want to think about that too, multimodal. So I feel like that's coming, bikes, whatever. And then facilities assessment, to Carol's point, if we can do the work, and maybe we address that later. And then the other one is skate park. Again, I feel like, and maybe that's a design build that we could outsource anyway because we probably don't have the expertise there, but it seems to me that that is a heavily utilized facility with a very small footprint. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, because with the skate park and the teen center, the whole area could really do a.
Yeah, teen center's not on here either, is it?
Mm-mm.
Why didn't that one? I'm just curious, why wasn't that on the CPACs?
So the teen center, as with all the department requests, we said don't request any facility improvements because we're doing a citywide assessment. And let's see where that comes in.
Okay. Sorry, I'm out of water up here. Do you guys have any water?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, a little bit.
That's good. Thanks.
Oh,
I'm good.
I'm not seeing it.
While she's looking for that, Ken, the plunge replacement scope assessment, what can we possibly accomplish with $100,000 of the plunge?
That's more of a community engagement piece and planning what the design would look like. What are the
For future,
needs?
'cause-
And then associating that with the design.
Got it.
As far as the teen center, what was approved was any funds, if we come under budget on the campus El Segundo shade structures or Holly Valley Park, what was left over would be allocated towards starting any teen center improvements.
Do you know what's needed, Meredith, for the teen center, roughly?
I think the sky's the limit, to be honest. I'm really interested to see, from a condition standpoint, but from a gathering place. Our goal was to start talking to the teens and seeing what they want, but our initial visions would include new furniture, definitely probably some exterior work on the building, whether it's painting or some design work. Inside, restroom renovations. We've kind of done our own weight room renovations recently, but probably creating certain spaces for the teen center. Maybe a computer lab, a reading area, homework area, and really trying to design it more from trying to engage more of the youth into that center. So to be determined, I think, but we've always talked probably $100,000 or so.
About 100 grand. Okay, thank you. That helps.
And then Acacia Park construction, that's the construction going on, but have we done a design for the Acacia Park?
No, I've received proposals from architect firms, and I'm going through those right now.
Okay.
And we'll be having a designer on board here pretty soon, probably workshops starting in October.
Okay, good. Because when is that, the drainage or the plumbing piece going to be completed?
The pump station rehabilitation project should be done in October.
Okay, so then when we get we're just going to start talking about the design, so we'll just be a construction site? till then?
We're
or-
working with Public Works to put the park back in some sort of nice condition, whether that's turf. There won't be any playground equipment initially, but internally, we're talking about what kind of interim solutions we can have out there for in between when the pump station is completed and the park
'Cause
design is complete.
I'd hate to waste money putting something back that's just gonna be ripped up.
We aren't. We're looking
Okay.
at a temporary solution that we could maybe install and then relocate afterwards.
Okay,
And
thank.
as far as skate park repairs, we have a preliminary concept and design that's been done pro bono by some folks that are involved here in town, and that preliminary number was $340,000 for a total redesign.
And that's like concrete and everything, obviously. Yeah.
What's the start to finish on something like that?
As far as
Timeline. I just mean the residents in that area of, in their minds, they thought that the park was just being.
Oh, back to, on Acacia.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we move on from that?
I thought you were talking about the skate park. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking that we could probably have some concepts in front of Rec Park Commission and City Council for probably early 2019, maybe January, and then putting that out to bid, and then construction's probably summer. or
I
a
can't
year
speak
from
for
now.
you guys, but I would like a plan in place before that pump station is complete.
Yeah.
So that it's already decided upon and you guys can just jump right into it. It needs to be prioritized for those people. The
Yeah.
people in that area have lived through this construction
Yes.
Yeah, and they're
for a
frustrated.
long time.
I mean, I think you're understating the level of frustration in that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
significant.
We need to have a plan. I think that's, if hindsight 2020, we should have probably had, the plan should have been in being developed.
They should have a big billboard. This is what your park's going to look like,
Yeah.
so they can dream about it while they're living through the nightmare.
Yeah,
Well, we'd like them to help us design the park, so that's what we'll be starting in October. And yes, you're right, we are a little bit behind schedule on that.
Okay. Any other ideas for
Spending money.
yes,
Yeah.
investing money?
I actually had a conversation with Greg and Meredith recently about having kind of a master plan for our fields and how we can get on some kind of schedule where Brett Field is given the time to be overseeded, properly leveled while games are maybe being played on the outfield at Stevenson, and then back over, and so that we can get on some sort of schedule so that the pieces of grass that are so highly sought after in this town actually look maybe like the middle school field, because the middle school field gets a break. It gets a 6-week break before Stryker starts on it every year, and Meredith and I were talking about it. It's like there is such a high demand for all these fields that they never get a break, and even if we are to maybe put a little bit more focus on, hey, let's move those practices over to Washington Park temporarily while that gets a break, and just sorting that out and actually adopting a master plan moving forward. Because right now we're just kind of taking care of issues as they arise. And
Is that an investment piece or more of like an ongoing
Management
operational and recurring expense piece?
Well, my thought is that to actually put together the plan is going to be an initial cost of, this is your assessment of your fields, this is what you need to do, that field is going to need that sort of, because there's going to be one-time spends where it's, all right, tear up the turf, level it, reseed it, go, and then it's going to be a maintenance component. Now, there's already a maintenance component somewhat in place as part of the Parks and Recreation budget currently, but there's no master plan in place.
is that something the Rec Park Commission could be working on?
Yes, and that was the discussion that I had was, there is, I think his name is Christopher, right? He took over from Mark Trujillo, so he is the head of that kind of realm. And I said, Meredith, how about you go to Christopher and say, sky's the limit. How would you do this? Because if we know, like, hey, that's the dream world where we have Dodger Stadium outfields on all of our baseball fields, and then, hey, here's the reality. This is what we can do. Because those fields are heavily, heavily utilized. And as we saw last year when campus was under construction, the town was crippled, essentially. And as I found out recently, you can't just go practice at campus field whenever you want. And So those patches of grass those are the public space, and that's the money that we gather in taxes from all the people in town. So, campus is great if you're with AYSO or with the co-ed league or with strikers and you have rented time allotted for you out there. But if you're just a soccer aficionado and you want to go out and try to bend it like Beckham, you cannot go out there. There's little window of drop in. So I think we need to put a little bit more focus on the fields that get the heavy use. I don't know what that dollar figure is, but I wanted to put it on all of your radars because it's something that I would like to work towards in the next 4 years sitting in this chair.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem or Councilman Pimentel?
My only limited question, and I promise it's very limited, is the Main and Imperial entryway beautification. Are those the only portals that we want to beautify? I mean, do we want something a sign or indicator that we want to budget for from El Segundo, especially if we're going to be redoing Smoky Hollow, or Smoky Hollow will be recast? Are there other elements that are going to access people that are heavily utilized that we want, to showcase?
Start here.
Yeah, I mean, this could be just something to put a bug in our ear for next time, but depending on what that beautification looks like, is that instead of a one-time cost, a recurring cost that we want to look to for subsequent years? So.
Great point. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I've often thought in that zone too, we have a lot of people that live here in town that take those commuter buses downtown, and either they're parking their cars over there along Imperial Way and or riding their bikes, and there's no bike racks over there. And the thought is, well, if you lead a horse to water, maybe they'll drink. If you poured a cement pad over there and had bike racks, would more people ride bicycles, lock them up, get on public transportation to go to their jobs downtown? Just a thought. Because right now you go over there and it's kind of a hodgepodge. And then
Where are you talking about?
talking right across the street from 7-Eleven.
Where the 438 bus picks up. You got to bring your bike with you.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
People
it's right
actually
there.
do that? They take the bus downtown?
Yeah.
I have.
Why not the train? I'm just curious.
They're usually
takes
really
longer.
handsome and brilliant.
It's a commuter bus, so it doesn't. stop
Oh,
very
it's
often.
kind of an express. Interesting.
Still a 45-minute door to door, but
I had no idea. Okay.
There's Wi-Fi on the bus. It's quiet.
Wow. You do it, huh?
Last one leaves at 8:13 every morning.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got Chris's idea, other points of entry beautification, either for this one or next year, is what I heard. Mayor Pro Tem Perstick.
No, I'm good. That's,
So we have more for sidewalks / stop signs. I saw some nodding here, and I actually recall Dr. Brand asking for sidewalk, and Ken came up here and talked about the difficulty in that and adding sidewalks. More for downtown, more for multimodal consideration. Let's see. Skate park, teen center, field management master plan, and other points of entry for beautification. So, Greg, do you want to deliberate on that for a while and get back to us, or do you want to try and put some dollars to that, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, can we just confirm, and I hate to do this, but maybe I'll do it quickly, just confirm either what was not approved or what was approved, but with the direction to staff to find current funds to address.
Okay.
That'll help us narrow down a number. So in general terms, we're talking about any new staff positions or any ongoing contract services. There was an expectation that staff go through the exercise to try to fund existing dollars for those.
Net neutral, right.
Where there are contract services listed here that are one-time, those were approved. And I'll walk through the
Not all of them, but yes.
Okay. So in item 1, the city clerk's department, I have the consultant for records retention, consultants to assist with Laserfish, and the kiosk as not approved. Under economic development, I have the upgrade.
You're just going with the no's? The not approved? Is that what you're covering?
Those were not approved.
Is that all you're going to be going through, though, is the not approved?
No, I was also going to go through those staff or consultant positions, which were.
Because I think if you aren't, then I think you missed one, which is remodel the city clerk's office, which was a yes, which is before economic development. I don't know if you're going in order or what you're.
That, I have that as approved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I was just doing the not approves and those.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going through the
Those that are
non-approved.
approved, yet they have to find the money inside.
Right.
Okay.
So the current economic development manager upgrade, the economic development specialist, and the communications management analyst I have as approved but not funded.
No, I thought that one
Not
was.
the analyst.
No, that was not approved.
Analysts we're going to bring back mid-year, is the notes
Okay.
I wrote.
Yes. Yep, me too.
I had the 18.5 yes, the 128 yes, the 140 mid-year.
Right.
That's what I have.
Under finance, those personnel decisions were approved because they actually result in some savings.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping down, I have the part-time HR management analyst being upgraded to full-time as a approved but find the dollars.
Yes.
The professional technical for IS I have as approved because it's one time. Is that correct?
Yes, I have that as a yes.
Okay. Converting the intern to full-time specialist was find the dollars.
Yes.
And I have the fire department accreditation program, we have put a dot in that, we put a hold on that, like, we put a
Pen
question.
in that one.
You wanted to come back to that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means tonight or at the next meeting. So let's hold that thought for a moment. Fire prevention laserfish, not approved. Fire department,
Well, it's not
Well,
that it's not approved, it's
IT
in
budget.
part of the IT budget.
using last year's dollars, so, right? So it's not approved for new dollars.
Well, it's,
Yes.
we're folding it into the
Get
IT.
it done. Get it done. Just use not 25,000 of new dollars. Is basically what we said, right?
Is that right? Okay.
I thought it was that the IT already has money that they haven't spent for
$350,000.
this coming year that
Yes.
is going to incorporate this.
So no additional budget
Yes.
dollars, right?
Might be saying
The fire department contract plan checker is okay if we can find dollars. The
Wait,
professional,
I'm sorry, that plan checker, I think, is that's a contract position, correct?
ongoing contract position, yes.
I thought we approved that.
I had a yes.
I have that
I
as a
didn't
yes.
have it circled
Okay.
as a no.
A yes, but it's recurring, right?
Yes.
No, ongoing.
Yeah, I think the idea was still find the funds, wasn't it? I think that was a discussion.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it's worth spending either way. But if we want to go look for the money for it internally, that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
I mean, 0-0 is good.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, we had one-time professional technical for planning and building as approved to get through the permit system implementation. We have professional technical, the next two items as find funding for. That's the professional technical for crime prevention, plan check consultant for PD, plan check, and the professional technical services for planning division. My understanding was that was an ongoing request. It says one time, so we'll clarify that. The reclass, the $3,100 was approved. Find the funding for that. Under police department, we have Lexipol dollars for that. There's two pieces there. One's the Lexipol dollars, which is I think a software contract, and using the methodology, I think that was approved, but the contract crime analyst, which is part of that $82,000, if we're using the methodology explained, is find the dollars for.
Yes.
The CSI property officer is a new position that we need, but using the methodology, you're asking us to find budget dollars for that, or
Yes.
current budget dollars. Parks and Rec, we have the two part-time positions in cable, which were approved if we can find efficiencies. And that was my list.
I also had upgraded senior admin specialist.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Although that's water, but we can potentially find money in the water fund.
So actually, no, I was just thinking, when you said senior, we don't have the Joslin Center on here, but was that part of the waiting for the assessment? Okay. I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, like the bathrooms in the Joslin Center? Yeah. Okay.
So the reason I went other than to make sure we have understanding and make all the department heads angry with me, I wanted to go through that list so I understand what residual dollars we have left that we can put towards that list of CIP needs that you just explained. And
or pension unfunded.
Yeah.
And what's that number?
644.
All right, what's going to change now?
we were not agreeing. It was,
I have a question while you're figuring out the math on that. What dollar amount is budgeted for waste removal in next year's budget? The current.
we
Yeah,
assumed
trash.
that we would cover the full cost.
We're
$1 million. Yeah.
So the 900,000, which actually only gets us through that partial term with Republic, correct?
It's a full year.
It is.
Yeah.
We have 16.
Yeah, it's doubling.
Well, I thought we only approved to go with Republic on that month to month for 6 months, maximum of 6 months.
So 6 months at $16.55
Yeah.
is 60% more. But we anticipated the $20 more for the 935,000 or so total budget. So we added that 404,000 to the 516. So
Okay, so
that's where
it's
we're
in the
at.
budget to cover if the 218 comes back in opposition. We have the
Right.
money there.
Up to, I believe, $20. If it goes to 40, then that's a different story.
Okay, I just wanted to make mention of that because if we're going to hold some funds aside in case,
It doesn't.
so
pass.
we don't get caught in some caught upside down.
But if it does pass, then we actually have some cash that we can put toward,
Which we could talk during this meeting next year, right?
yeah, the teen center. or something.
Bless you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, are you still calculating, Joe?
Yes. Greg had 910,000.
I say we put another 500 into the fund and
The pension fund or?
wait on the 400,000, especially with the trash and
Which fund are you referring to?
The pension.
Pension trust fund? Ken, did you have
Yeah,
something?
may I? So to clarify this for me, are we looking for council to approve the capital budget, the capital program as it sits tonight? Because these requests I'm taking as additional for next fiscal year, or we are removing projects here
Well,
so we can deliver them.
This is the maximum number you can do, correct?
Right,
They just hand a tool. This is the maximum number that you can
Right.
do.
Does that include the outsourcing? Because like the skate park, what's involved in that? Rexton Park would do that. The build out would be done by an outside firm, right?
Well, the strategy needs to be really vetted out. I've done skate parks before, and it could go from we're going to do this, and we're going to tell you what we're doing, and that typically isn't welcome. And then there's the user group outreach, just like Acacia Park, where we want to get out there and say, hey, what do you want? And it could go from design build to design and get it all approved, and then go out and bid build. So there's a lot of things to think about, which is why I'm thinking each of these requests are something that need to be defined further and put on a project sheet and brought before CPAC, possibly, or we vet them out for the next meeting and create project sheets for council's consideration as to which of these priority projects that CPAC's already and Planning Commission have approved are removed, so we can put these projects for your consideration next time.
I don't know about you guys, but I didn't fantasize at all that a request like that was going to be like, yep, we're on it this year. I figured this was me planting the seed to have that discussed within the next calendar year. But I didn't think for half a second that it would actually be done that quick, because the city doesn't seem to move that quick on anything.
Yeah, a couple of these, maybe we have to give something up. I hear what you're saying. A couple of things like sidewalks, stop signs, some of these basic things.
But a stop sign, you're going to have to do a traffic study to get a stop sign approved, right?
I appreciate that. So I did want to make a point of clarification, and for those at 10:30 that may be listening and watching, stop signs are not ever for speed control, and there are a series of about 12 warrants that need to be studied for the state to say this is a proper installation of a stop sign, and the counterpoint to that is I've seen at other agencies where stop signs are installed without these, and accidents happen, and cities are sued, and they lose big because they put a traffic measure in there wasn't warranted, it wasn't justified. Traffic committee gets these requests, and we, traffic committee being myself and streets supervisor and members of the police department, and we look at each request. Probably have about 6 meetings a year, and stop signs are included in that. And we take a look at the accident history and the visibility and the traffic volumes, and see whether we should pursue the next step to have a traffic engineer firm come in and do the actual analysis. And it does take time, but of course, if it does show, it's not an expensive measure. It's just making sure we do it right for each location.
We're already doing that, right, in a couple locations? When are those results going to be?
So the main Grand Mariposa, I do have the draft study for the traffic safety study to me last week. So I went through it. I'm going to discuss it with PD. Not going to share it over the public yet, but once I discuss it with them, we'll be coming to council with recommendations as appropriate.
Great. All right, thanks. So
is it enough for us, though, to let him know that we want that prioritized because we've heard it from the public?
well, it sounds like we're not going to have, what I'm hearing is that we either give something up or it's not going to get done.
Well, I think it sounds like that stop signs, there's a process that is independent of this. The stop sign train leaves from a different station than these sort of projects. And the sidewalk one we covered last time, but that one.
And are we talking about new sidewalks or additional money for repairs? Because we have
brand new shiny sidewalks.
So I've
Paved with gold.
discussed with council that logic. We do have $250,000 of sidewalk repair and replacement, as well as $80,000 for the same in CDBG funds that we have in our capital plan this year, and that's an annual project, but not for new sidewalks. And new sidewalks like new sewers or new storm drains or other infrastructure is provided by a developer, meaning either a person building a house and they got to build a sidewalk in front of their house, or a major Plaza El Segundo and they do it all around and all the other infrastructure. So it's something that we don't construct new, but once folks do construct it and we inspect it and accept it, then we're responsible for maintenance in perpetuity, which is definitely a cost and a liability. So there's definitely a map of areas that we do not have sidewalks, and to say let's start building new sidewalks is certainly something that you can say, and we will need to come up with a plan to prioritize all the missing sidewalks around our city. So it's something that we need to consider.
Would this be the forum that we could, say, make a recommendation moving forward to give the direction to the Public Works Director that all sidewalks, we would like to hear about sidewalk requests put forth so that we can make that determination moving forward, or we would like to hear about stop sign requests, being that it is a priority of ours?
Sure. I think that's reasonable.
Maybe once a quarter or something? Or?
I just mean, the last thing I think we want to find ourselves in is us getting a barrage of emails from residents that are like, we made this request and they said no. And you told us that it was your priority. And I mean, we don't want to find ourselves in that situation. We'd rather get ahead of that, you know? So do we have consensus to say, give that direction to Ken? Like, if you receive these requests, please bring them to us.
Or just give us an update once a quarter or
Well,
something.
How about we ask Ken to come back to another council meeting to just give us an idea of how to best do that rather than trying to knock that out right now? Can we do
Okay.
that, Scott?
I mean, the traffic committee meeting summary or public record, I could provide that. It's as simple as that.
That would be good. Quarterly?
Pretty much bi-monthly, depending on how many requests that we get.
I think each one of us is probably hearing from people in town that they're concerned about different areas of town, and we need to be prepared with a better answer, is what we're here. What I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just nice to know when something has been evaluated and there was a reason it was not. You know, that one on Whiting by your house, I think that's been looked at probably about a half dozen times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the one comes up every time, but the stop sign doesn't exist and for a very good reason. I don't know what that is, but I know it doesn't exist for a very good reason because it's come before the traffic committee. So it'd be good to be armed with that. It's a public record. We
It
probably-
didn't even dawn on me, but I'm hearing it from all my neighbors. And then I look at it and go, well, this does seem a little sketchy when you're walking out across that street. So it would be good to have some rationale. So maybe we could let that one sit with you. Can you come
Okay.
back to us with some recommendations there? Sure, please. Thank you.
And then one thing we didn't talk about, and I know we just got a letter, it was about parking on Grand and the time that people can park on Grand. Like if we decide to do a study to see how long, like at what time frame, if we want to remove some of the like the ban on parking on Grand, so that the residents can now actually park.
Mr. Jean Grande's email, that's part of the traffic study too, isn't it, Ken? The Grand Avenue, wasn't that part of it? And so you're coming forward with that, right? You said draft report, next meeting or something?
With any recommendations from that report,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we address that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Let's
I
put a
can speak
placeholder
from
on that.
experience. When you live on Grand in the middle of the night, there are empty trucks that drive eastbound on Grand, and when a truck is empty, it bounces, and it sounds like an earthquake, and it is quite exciting.
I've lived in 2 places on Grand,
Yes,
so I
so
can
you
relate.
know.
All right. Does that
Yeah,
address your
that's- yeah.
concern? Okay, so let's just put a placeholder in that. All right. So we don't have the funds for some of these other projects, but we think they're important. I think Ken has suggested we go back to CPAC with these additional considerations, see if there's any reprioritizing that they want to do. Ken, if that's not too much work. That is these additional things. I think that's what I heard you suggest. Or do we just
Not this fiscal year for
Okay.
CPAC, because that process is completed, but certainly create the project sheets. We could come back with that to consider removing the recommendations before you tonight.
That's what I'm saying. Like, do we? I mean, I know CPAC. They meet what, twice a year, once a year, once a year.
It's a process of a few months, and we meet 3 times.
Okay, I guess I'm not clear. Are you saying that some of these things could be considered with CPAC and remove some of these other items that already have dollars earmarked for them? Or are you just saying hold off on these things you brought up tonight altogether until this time next year?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Correct.
is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
So none of these are, like the bleacher replacement is not needed now, the drainage improvement not needed now, the 800 block McCarthy Court Street improvement not necessary now in your assessment.
No, they are.
Those
That's
are
what we're
happening.
approving
Those are
tonight.
happening.
Talk
Okay.
about our
I'm talking about these
brainstorming hours.
additional ones
Oh,
we brought
yes,
up.
yes, okay, good.
So if we have,
Whoa.
thanks, Ken. If we have $900 and something left to the good, 910, do we want to make a recommendations to pay down some of these negative amortization line items?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's the best return on our money, hands down.
I'll move to use $500,000 of that towards that.
And what will you do with the rest?
I would sit on it in case the 218 ballot gets opposed, and in case some of these other things come back to us mid-year. I mean, we're asking them to basically, yeah, you could have that person on your staff if you find the money, and I guarantee you some of these departments are going to come back hat in hand saying, you can't find the money. And
Please don't guarantee that, but thank you. I know what you're saying. Joe and Greg, are you okay with that? His
Yeah,
recommendation?
I agree with Councilmember Nichol. We're not going to find $900,000 in a $70 million budget. We're going to try. That's the instruction from council, and we'll make a good effort at it. Some departments, it's going to be easier. Departments that have a $10 million budget that need to find $100,000, that's what, 1%.
I don't think we're saying that we're expecting that, Greg. It's not
It's
that.
not about the departments,
It's not by
overall.
department. We're saying find 4 or 5 roles, head count, to make up that money in different areas.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be per department, and we took from one department, they have to replace it as a whole. 200, whatever.
Yeah, I get it. But most department heads are going to look internally first, right? What can I do within my operation to reduce personnel or reduce some discretionary spending to the extent we have discretionary spending?
The
But
good
as-
news is every employee association group has been sitting on all these CalPERS meetings, so they understand the situation that we're faced with, right? So hopefully that helps. I mean, we want to do more with the employees we have here, is what I heard on the dais, as opposed to adding additional headcount, knowing that there's a significant PERSable component of about 40% of every labor dollar. That's what we're concerned about. I think everyone
Yeah.
agrees with that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the motion from Scott is to use $500,000 and park $410,000 till mid-year, maybe? Is that what you're saying?
And Greg, just to clarify, this, or Joe, you can speak to this too. So just looking at this sheet, the $6.8 million ask that's not all of the surplus, correct?
Right, that was the August number, so the number that I presented earlier today was $7.1 million.
So we actually have a little bit more money.
You were showing another
So-
300 with a variable number.
So that's
going
4,
into the-
5, 6, 7, so 700,000.
I guess.
Correct, so do you want to, we can either leave that in reserves or allocate that towards,
I'd rather leave it in reserves. I just wanted to make sure that this 910 number, that's not everything and then zero. I knew that there was more money. I knew that staff didn't come to us and have every single penny accounted for in the ask of the surplus, correct? Or did staff do a
correct.
really good? Okay.
Right.
So the one thing we did not address was the accreditation for the fire.
You know, I actually had this question that came up following item 14 on our agenda. So you can loan money from one fund to another. Does that mean technically, now I'm not saying we're going to do this, so don't jump out of your seat over there, Chief Donovan, but technically could you loan money from that equipment replacement fund to something else?
Well, we
Did.
technically did, but not officially. That's the equipment replacement loaned money to the golf course. That's never been formalized.
That's right. Got it.
So as soon as that loans is paid back, we'll have plenty of money in that equipment and replenish.
Well, one of the items I'm going to bring before council, now that you adopt the policy, is actually formalizing that loan.
So hold on a second, just so I can understand this, because my brain just kind of exploded. We had $5 million saved in the equipment replacement fund when we gave $5 million to the Lakes facility.
It happened over a course of many years.
So what did we not replace?
Well, remember,
Because, I mean, the whole concept of the equipment replacement fund,
We went a long time without replacing a fire engine, as I understand it, right? And before we instituted a formalized policy of actually attriting it based on an actuarial table.
I mean, Scott, I guess it's like your kid's college fund. You can use, if you want to, you can use those funds for something else for the first 18 years of their life, right? But the bill comes due in year 18, so we use those dollars to pay off the interest-bearing golf course loan, to get rid of the interest and internalize the obligation. That happened, I believe, in 2011.
I guess I'm just simple concept. There was $5 million that was meant for replacing equipment throughout this town
That went to the golf.
that went to the golf course. And so I'm saying is, okay, if it was ever to be paid back, it's not like we're not missing $5 million worth of equipment. We have since
no.
reallocated funds. Previous councils have had to do more with less.
Well, that's not purchasing $5 million. Remember, we have an amortization schedule, so the funds build up over time. So you have a lot of money sitting there at any one point in time in the equipment replacement fund. And so that there was this fund that had an excess amount of money that wasn't being used in the short term. And I believe when the funds were transferred to the golf course, the belief was at that time that the golf course was going to improve, and the golf course was able to repay the equipment replacement fund back within a short period of time. Obviously, that didn't happen. But those are not necessarily items that were not purchased.
So,
That's
but
just
we need to
dollars that are
definitely-
not sitting in the equipment
We need
replacement.
to recognize the fact that councils that have sat here before us have found a way to do what we're being asked to do without $5 million over a long period of time.
Right.
Okay.
A couple hundred a year. I think
Or
is
the
what I saw
citizens of
right.
El Segundo have had to deal with, equipment that should have been out of service and it was still in service. Okay, sorry. We might be here another hour. Woo! Sorry.
It's okay. I think I don't know about the half. I feel like we should go bigger than the $500,000 towards the negative amortization. I mean, it's the one thing we can do to
Pay down.
really reduce future
Maybe
liability
$800,000.
and save a ton of interest. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have the sheet in front of you. from the August meeting, but I had 748,000
Yeah.
as a suggested earmark, and we can add the 500,000 on top of that. So that would be 1.2 million, 1,248,000.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, let's just round it to 1.5.
Yeah, just round to 1.5.
1.5, okay.
And we have this big economic reserve, big-ish, 19%.
I mean, he's not here, but you know, that's one of the 3 Ps,
Mhm.
right? Pensions. Like he didn't want us to go to 19% in reserves, right?
Yeah.
He wanted to go down to like 13% and start paying off some liability.
Yeah, to that end, Dr. Brandon's not here tonight. He wanted to not be at this part of the meeting because he didn't agree with the direction we're headed, just for the record, but, okay. All right.
Okay, so we're going to 1.5 then to pay down the debt.
Yes.
Do you need a motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0, great. He did. Councilman Nickel.
He did.
It's getting
That
late.
guy.
That guy.
You're kind of spread out here there, Chris.
All right.
Let's get closer.
Anything, what else on the budget?
Mayor, can I just ask for a clarification? So for the CIP that's on here, we're moving forward with this, or yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the effort Ken, you and that CPAC group put into it.
I think. Can I make?
Oh, the
Oh.
accreditation, I keep bringing it up. The 100,000 for
Was it the
accreditation.
fire truck too?
Fire truck, I was like, I wasn't quite sure. I asked to reconsider that one.
The
I'd rather
money's
do the
th-
fire truck and not the accreditation.
What, if the money's there, it's sitting there. What's it going to do for another year if it's there next year? I guess I'm.
Earnest
Is more
interest,
money
not a
gonna be in
lot.
there?
Earnest some interest, not a lot, but.
Excuse me, the engine will go up in cost by probably 3 to 4%, maybe as much as 5%. So we'll see, on $800,000, that's a pretty big chunk of money. Our equipment replacement fund, because it has been depleted over the years, this request, we're only using less than half of our equipment replacement for the purchase of this pumper. So really, we'd be on a trajectory of replacing it, unfortunately in about 3 or 4 years, and that's not appropriate for the service life. So we have an opportunity right now to use some developer fees and some strike team reimbursement money. This does not hit the general fund, and again, this would be, in my opinion, a prudent move to reduce what we anticipate to be increases in not only the cost of an engine next year, but also repair costs. And again, this is not a reserve apparatus. This is that front line in the number 2 position.
I'm for it.
Joe, in your financial forecasts, in this potential looming recession or another recession that may be coming, how long do you forecast it lasting? Because what we're being told is that if we replace this frontline vehicle, we're not going to be posed to this question again for another decade.
Correct.
From the fire department. We will long be through whatever dip there would be in 10 years, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, typically, recessions don't last that long, but.
Right. I guess I'm just thinking, because through that recession point, if we need to borrow from this, now that you've told me you have $1.6 million in that account and this is only half, we might be able to borrow from that to pay off other liabilities if we were in a position where we were strapped for cash.
Or you can reduce the funding. So the general fund, it's about 1.3, 1.4 million a year that's coming out of the general fund to fund the equipment replacement fund. So in prior years, when there was a recessionary period, either that was significantly reduced or just not funded whatsoever. So that's also another mechanism to save some dollars.
I think to that point, then, if the cost is going to go up, we have the money now. Our hand might be forced to use that money for something else in a few years, and then we'd have a rig that was past its serviceable life. I think we should buy a new fire truck.
I concur.
It's past its serviceable life on an
actuarial table. I mean, it works. I'm just saying, like, I mean, you can buy a new car every 2 years, and you'll get a new car every 2 years, and that's nice. It smells like a new car. But that doesn't mean your old car's broken every 2 years. So it may make there may be an actuarial table for the depreciation that we move these things along. I'm just saying that in the interest of, financial and fiscal probity, like getting as much time out of a vehicle as you can. A truck gets a second life. The truck goes into works, right? The pickup gets a second life. This thing becomes razor blades later. I mean, so you hold on to it now, and you drive it as long as you can. Would be my druthers. But
The counterart to that, sir, though, is when it doesn't work, it's a direct impact to life safety, and that's what we want to avoid. So we intentionally have frontline apparatus that's well maintained and equipped. We follow a depreciation schedule because we do have rigs that go out of the county on strike teams. We do have rigs that go down on maintenance and need long-term repair. So a transmission breaks, it's a 3 to 4 to 5 week repair where that rig is out of service, and we bring the reserve into frontline status. That old reserve has a higher likelihood of breaking, and when that second reserve breaks, now we're out of resources, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
And unfortunately, the turnaround time is quite large, long.
They're big pieces of equipment. They require specialty centers. We have to ship them out of, in fact, it leaves our area and goes East County for repairs, and sometimes it's gone for weeks for major repairs. And so the prudent move, again, is to maintain frontline apparatus, to replace them and put them into our reserve status, which is still in front line for 10 years, but still making sure that it is mechanically sound. And then we take it out of service after 20 years, just because we want to make sure we have 4 fire engines that are fully functional and working. That is a prudent and safe move for our community.
That drill that you attended last week, how often did they talk about the emergency vehicles?
I want to be delicate with this because we're talking about life safety and it's important, right? And I don't think we want to get in a position where we are trying to put dollar signs on response times and it becomes a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down on that. But I've sort of lived the life cycle for important equipment, and I understand how that piece works. And there's funding apparatus and there's methods and techniques about the preventative maintenance and the remediation maintenance pieces. And if there's things like that, that if this thing is an $800,000 vehicle and there's a $50,000 worth of parts, if there's and I don't know where transmissions for fire trucks come from, but if we need to buy a T-case and a new engine and have it sitting around and have, a specialized maintainer aboard who works on that, that's in one sense, somewhat cheaper than continually investing in new vehicles. Because when you go down the rabbit hole of, well, we always need, this is like the classic story of having to have 2 Jaguars, right? Because one always breaks down. I mean, if this thing was sitting on the lot all the time not running, then I think we would be having a different conversation. But it sounded like from our previous conversation that the maintainers were having success in keeping this thing fully functional and running. And the only reason for it appearing on this list is that because its timestamp on depreciation had come up, not because it was continually having maintenance problems or exhibiting signs of an aging engine. So I don't want to put you on the spot to a degree, but
no, it's having it did. It had on one of the engines we put a new motor into it. On another engine we put a new transmission into it. At what point are you throwing good money after bad? And I think that's part of the argument here, that we want to make sure that we're making wise choices. And $800,000 is a huge investment, but it's a 20-year investment, so we amortize that. And we have the money now to do it, and it does not impact the general fund.
There's no financing available for this? I'm just curious. I know you
Yeah.
have the money, but
Yeah,
there's...
you could finance them, certainly.
What's the interest rate on something like that, 4 or 5%?
Well,
No,
to what
it's-
benefit?
yeah.
Usually there's a benefit to paying
Cash
paying
flow.
along, right?
Cash flow. We get in a situation where we need that $800,000 for some other purpose 2 years from now. I also struggle with this. I deal with this with my business all the time. I have like 60 trucks.
No, but
and
to that point, if
Can I finish?
Sorry,
Real
yeah.
quick. And we're constantly, it's this cost equation of how much money are we spending to maintain this as a percentage of our revenue on an ongoing basis versus at what point do we just bite the bullet? We've replaced the engine, we've replaced the tranny. How long is the chassis going to, you know, all those things. I'm really struggling with this one too because it is such a large sum of money. We don't have the expertise in-house to do like engine swaps, transmissions, things like that. Everything's outsourced. Is any maintenance done on those vehicles
We
outside
do.
of oil
We
changes?
have inside maintenance. They're good mechanics. They do a good job. We maintain, we do periodic maintenance, but when large repairs occur, we have to ship those out.
Mhm.
And again, these are very specialized pieces of equipment that we maintain them at a very high level of maintenance. So we need reliability. It's really important that we have reliability.
How much do you know roughly, Chief, how much an engine is to replace in one of those?
Of the motor itself, I don't. No.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I just know if I don't say it, I'll forget it, so then I write it down.
I know that problem.
Now, question, are the fuel?
Hold on. You
I
just
just
did
thought
what
of
he did.
something.
Hold, please. Floor is yours.
We're tired.
Earlier, we were talking about the 115 pension trust earning upwards of 8% return. Also, if we can, to Drew's point, or to Mayor Boyles' point, if we can borrow funds to buy the truck at less than 8%, then technically you can move that money from the replacement fund into that 115 pension trust fund and earn a better return. And that would be just a better use of the money. Yes, no? Am I alone on this?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know what type of financing rate we would get for purchasing a fire truck. I haven't looked into it. It's not like the same, you can go to a bank and probably get 2 to 3% loan for a vehicle. It's not going to be that same process for a fire truck. It's something I can look into. But I have absolutely no idea what that rate would be.
Now then, okay, I'm going to go crazy question then. So most of our fund, most of our reserve is earning like a 2% return?
Yes.
So are we allowed to borrow from that? I know that this is a shell game, but if we borrow something that's only earning 2% and we take that money and we put it over there where it's earning 8%, technically are we not doing better?
Well, when you send it to the trust, that's not borrowing. When you send it to the trust, it's no longer
gone.
city funds.
Okay. Got it.
And then it's restricted what the use is for. Obviously, it's just for pension costs. But so those funds actually come off the city books, and it's no longer considered a city asset.
But they could be used towards our unfunded liability.
Yes. Correct.
Got it. So, I mean, it's still a sticky web, but that could...
That's something I did ask, and City Treasurer Krista Binder was with me when we met with PARS originally when we set the fund up. Can we dump money in there at the beginning of the year, and when we make our unfunded pension liability in July, pull that money out, let it sit there for a year, pull the money out and use it to pay the unfunded pension liability. I think the issue there is you would have to really go to more of a liquid fund where the rate is going to be much lower. So we're in a moderate fund where it's about 50% equities, and then the other 50% is a mixture of bonds and fixed income. So if we're going to go with that model, dump more money in there and use it, pull out of it annually to make our unfunded pension liability, we would have to go to a more conservative portfolio, which would earn a lower rate of return.
Okay. Just trying to be creative with what we have.
So my question is, this new fire truck, would it have a better fuel economy as far as how much are we paying in fuel and how much could we save in our fuel costs?
I don't know the exact what do they call it, miles per gallon? Sorry, MPG on, but it is the new clean diesel, so that's one benefit. The rig that we would replace is the old dirty diesel. That's an important distinction. I believe there's a mandate that by 2020 that unit would have to be surplus anyways. We go to a clean diesel. I would imagine you're going to get some benefit on the fuel efficiency, but the biggest one for us is the clean diesel component of it.
So we really only have one more year on this this truck, if it has to be pushed out by 2020.
Yeah.
So we're really only talking about a year.
I think that's probably the most important fact of this entire conversation.
Is that the clean diesel proposition that our assemblywoman pushed forward? That
It's AB 32, isn't
AB
it?
32 that we get to
Cold
go to?
one.
This is an existing AQMD.
Oh, okay. Is there money available in that for replacement if they're mandating replacement of our vehicles?
No, diesel
Not for
particulate
this.
filtration, matter filtration. It's after product, you add it and everything.
Plus, we don't hit the mileage requirement. So those are usually long-distance trucks that get that AQMD. We
Can
tried,
Can we
and
not drive it to come?
no, ma'am.
So you're pretty confident this would have to be replaced in the next year anyway? Ken's like not so sure. And
There's our, we have 156 vehicles, including these. There are several that are these quote-unquote dirty diesels that need to be replaced. So I believe that's on the list.
I would go forward with this, but my ask would be this, that we, and I've mentioned this before on the dais, that we strongly consider not buying vehicles whenever possible. That we use Lyft, Uber, whatever means, that we don't need as many vehicles as we have in this city. I understand this is very specialized, and I know, Ken, a lot of yours are, but there are plenty of other cars for inspectors, et cetera, that are not specialized at all. So I would ask that we be way more frugal in terms of buying assets that depreciate immediately and add no value to the residents, essentially, when there's other alternatives. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this. Chris, still not?
You know, there's a term you may recall from the Navy, right? The SLEP, right? Service Life Extension Program. You just, except that the same B-52H has been flying now rolled off the assembly line in 1961 and is still serviceable. And admittedly, it's apples and oranges and a different supply chain and big parts and all these sorts of things. But if it's got to go in 2020, and it's still running now, why don't drive till 2020? I mean, order it then. I mean, every dollar we save now, right, is a dollar. I mean, it's a dollar at access. And I know that this funding is already there and exists, but that fund is funded by the general fund. So in a sense, we're kicking a can way down the road, right? Some guy at 2060 has to buy an engine 1 year sooner because we bought one now. You know, again, is this the hill I want to die on? No, but it's sort of a matter of efficiency. You know, I drove around in LAV 25, made 1976. You know, same year I was born.
That's a good point. It's a good point, but I guess to the chief's point, how much more is that engine going to cost us in 2 years, and will that money earn that same interest? That then, like, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by not buying it sooner?
All right, let's
Can we sell it to Hermosa?
Let's move. All right, all in favor of approving the $800,000 purchase of the engine? Aye. No. Okay. 3-1. I don't even know if we needed to vote on that. I don't know
How
why I
about
did that.
What about the police van?
The accreditation?
Accreditation. Okay, Carol, you had a thought on that, right?
No,
Oh.
we haven't approved it, so we put a pin in it, didn't we?
We did. Yeah, I thought you
So
had a thought on that, or
I
no?
just want to keep.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's addressed.
You guys looking at me like I'm gonna say
Anyone have a
something.
strong sentiment on this?
You mentioned something earlier. I should have asked then. You said that by this accreditation, or the city getting this accreditation, it actually helps with insurance for businesses.
Correct. So,
It will lower their insurance rate.
Correct.
Kind of like a low crime rate makes my car insurance go down.
So we are rated every 10 years by the ISO, the Insurance Service Organization, and they rate fire departments from 10 to 1, 10 being the worst, 1 the best. Those have a direct correlation to business insurance rates. We're currently a 3. Most of the departments that go through the accreditation, once they're accredited, the first call they make is to ISO to request a re-evaluation. And anecdotally, every department that has done that has gone up in the ISO rating. So it's fair to reason that we would go from a 3 to a 2. I doubt we would get to an ISO 1, Class 1 department, but going from a 3 to a 2 would bring a benefit to the businesses from their insurance rates through ISO.
So maybe they should pay the first.
Well, I mean, if we want to if we go back to our strategic planning and what our goals are, right? I mean, we're trying to attract new business. We want to be that city that people want to come to. And one of those things, whenever we talk about a business that's thinking about landing in Venice or Santa Monica or coming here, we always talk about we have no gross receipts tax and how wonderful that is. I don't know if there's just another feather in our cap where it's like, look at your balance sheet. You come to El Segundo, that cost is going to go down as well. I don't know. I mean, $105,000 doesn't seem that expensive. I know there is ongoing costs, but to be able to have that feather to continue to try to attract people. I mean, earlier we talked about the vacancies that we have currently. If we can get more businesses in those vacancies.
Okay, do we have consensus on the accreditation? Yes, I hear.
Yeah, the return on investment piece is of interest, but I think the fact that we have a fire department that performs so highly, and we can show response times under 4 minutes, and is spread out in 2 distinct zones of the city, that sells itself as that additive process. I no doubt that accreditation would resonate, but I think you'd have to be a pretty discriminating buyer to understand the ramifications from that. I mean, you'd have to be pretty far down the rabbit hole of commercial acumen to know what that distinct piece is. Now, there is certainly a value in investing in the process, and there's certainly value in training and evaluating that. But in the way that we look to put money into our life safety departments, I think there's other things we're looking at that we want to put this $105,000 toward that may stand in front of the line in front of the accreditation process.
I'm going to agree with Chris on this one.
I will as well. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you.
Chief. Yeah, thank you. Did you want to comment on that? Are you good? Good as is? Okay, thank you.
No,
All right,
win
did we
some,
have
you
anything
lose
else?
some.
I believe that we are there. I think that the challenge that the department heads and myself have is to take a closer look at our vacancies, at our discretionary funds, and discretionary sort of in quotes, to see where we can address some of these issues. And I understand council wants us to go through that exercise, and we'll report back either at the first quarter or potentially mid-year on some of these items. I'm not going to allow reductions where there's a service impact. That doesn't make sense, right? So there may be service impacts to not doing some of these things that were brought forward tonight. I just want to echo that I think most of these things were vetted well. They were trying to respond to strategic planning. Council challenged the department heads in strategic planning to come up with innovative ideas and to push themselves towards constant improvement. And I think a number of these concepts were aimed at that. But we'll go through the real exercise. I don't want to minimize it of looking at our budget again and seeing where we can address some of these things. I'm sure we can find some efficiency, but we'll likely be back talking to you again, which is the exercise is worthwhile.
Okay. Thank you to staff for sticking around. Barbara, it looks like she's sleeping over there. Just kidding. I'm just envious of the position in the chair there. All right. Thank you all. Have a great night. This concludes our budget session.